She was supposed to hand out gifts, not become one. Noelle Adams was an orphan, a broke student dressed as Santa, crashing a mafia Christmas party for $300 until Romeo Marchetti saw the birthmark on her wrist and went completely still. By midnight, she wasn't a guest anymore. She was locked in his study with a choice she never asked for: 1 year as his wife, or vanish forever. She didn't know why that small mark made the most feared man in the city look haunted. And Romeo Marchetti, the man who owned half the city and trusted no one, didn't know how to let her go. Because the girl in the Santa suit wasn't just a mistake. She was a threat to everything he'd built, and the only thing he couldn't destroy. The woman who opened the door didn't smile. "You're late, Santa," she said. The words landed flat and final, as though she'd already decided what Noelle was worth. She stepped aside without waiting for a response, and the house closed around Noelle, warm air brushing her skin as marble floors stretched beneath a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a museum. "I'm Valentina. Follow me." Noelle stepped into the foyer, the heat hitting her like a wall. Pine, cinnamon, polished stone, and something heavier beneath it: power, permanence, a life she didn't belong to, but she barely registered any of it because of him. The man stood near the staircase with his phone pressed to his ear, his back half-turned, tall, imposing, mid-30s, dark hair pushed back from his face. The sleeves of his white dress shirt were rolled to his elbows, exposing tanned forearms where veins ran beneath the skin and dark ink disappeared under the fabric. He smelled incredible, something warm and masculine that sliced cleanly through the pine and cinnamon, and then he spoke. "Handle it." His voice was low, cold, the kind of calm that promised violence. "I don't want problems. If he doesn't cooperate, hurt him." Noelle's stomach dropped, her feet stopping without her permission as she stared at the back of his head. He ended the call and turned, sliding the phone into his pocket with a casual grace that didn't match the words he'd just spoken, his other hand slipping into his trouser pocket as his eyes swept the foyer and landed on her. Amber, golden brown against olive skin, catching the light like honey held up to the sun, the kind of eyes that didn't belong on a man who said hurt him without blinking. For 2 seconds, maybe 3, they looked at each other, and Noelle forgot how to breathe, her heart slamming against her ribs loud enough that she was sure he could hear it. His gaze traveled down her ridiculous costume, the stuffed belly, the 2 big boots, then back up, slower this time, lingering where the costume couldn't quite hide her, something shifting in his expression, a flicker of amusement cutting through the cold. "A woman Santa." His voice dropped half a register as his eyes held hers. "With curves. Interesting." Heat exploded across Noelle's face, spreading down her neck like wildfire as she opened her mouth to respond, but he was already walking past her toward the hallway, not even acknowledging Valentina, disappearing around the corner like she wasn't worth a second thought. Noelle stood frozen, arms wrapping around herself, her face burning while his voice still echoed in her ears. What the hell was that? She should have turned around, should have walked back through those iron gates and never looked back. But she didn't. "That's my brother, Romeo," Valentina said, appearing at Noelle's side, her mouth curving in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Try not to take it personally, Santa. He only scares people when there's a reason." "Romeo?" Of course his name was Romeo, because this night wasn't surreal enough. "This way." Valentina was already walking, her heels clicking a brisk rhythm against the marble. "Chiara's in the living room. She's 8, very smart, asks a lot of questions. Fair warning." Noelle forced her legs to move, but her mind was still stuck on rolled sleeves and tattoos and a voice that said with curves, like other people said, "Pass the salt." 2 hours, she reminded herself, her palms growing slick inside the cheap gloves. Just survive 2 hours. If only she'd known. Those 2 hours would change everything. The living room was enormous but surprisingly warm, with a fire crackling in a stone fireplace and a massive Christmas tree glittering in the corner. And in the center of it all, sitting cross-legged on an expensive rug, was a tiny blonde girl in a sparkly red dress. She looked up when Noelle entered, and her eyes went wide. "Santa!" The girl scrambled to her feet and ran, not to Noelle but around her, circling like a tiny predator, assessing prey before stopping directly in front of her with her arms crossed and her chin lifted. "You're kind of short." Noelle forced her voice into a deep baritone, praying it sounded convincing. "I'm shrinking. Budget cuts at the North Pole." Chiara didn't laugh. Instead, she leaned closer, her small nose wrinkling as she sniffed once, twice, before her gaze dropped, slowly, deliberately, to Noelle's chest, and a long pause stretched between them. "Santa, you have boobs." Heat exploded across Noelle's face, spreading down her neck as her hands flew to her belly pillow, adjusting it uselessly. "Cookies," she managed, the word coming out strangled. Chiara's eyebrows disappeared beneath her bangs, her head tilting as she waited for more. "What?" "Too many cookies." Noelle swallowed hard, her throat clicking. "Emotional eating." The girl considered this with the gravity of a judge weighing evidence, her small fingers drumming against her crossed arms and her lips pursed in concentration. "Grandma used to say Santa is fat, not that." Noelle tugged at her slipping beard with trembling fingers, desperate to change the subject. "Different Santas. Regional." "So you're a girl Santa?" Chiara's eyes narrowed, not buying it for a second. "Seasonal model." Too fast, too desperate, and Noelle knew she'd lost the moment the words left her mouth. Something shifted in Chiara's face, suspicion melting into something sharper, something like delight, and she grabbed Noelle's gloved hand with a surprisingly strong grip, dragging her toward an armchair by the fireplace. "Sit. We need to talk." Noelle sat, the leather groaning beneath her, because she didn't have much choice. Chiara climbed onto her lap, knees digging into Noelle's thighs, and leaned close until her breath, warm, faintly sweet with candy canes, brushed Noelle's cheek. "I know you're not real," she whispered loudly, conspiratorial and thrilled, "but I need something." Noelle shifted slightly, then rested her hand on Chiara's knee, grounding both of them before she spoke. Her grip tightened just a little. "Okay," she said softly. "What do you need?" Chiara pointed toward the doorway where Romeo had disappeared earlier, her small finger steady, decisive. "A girlfriend for my uncle. That one. Tall, grumpy, works too much." Noelle's mind flashed to rolled sleeves, strong forearms marked by veins beneath the skin, and that voice, low, calm, careless with danger, and her mouth went dry. "His name is Romeo." Chiara bounced impatiently on her lap, her elbow catching Noelle's ribs. "Can you bring him a girlfriend?" Noelle shifted, trying to breathe around the girl's sharp little bones. "I don't bring girlfriends. I inspire bad decisions." Chiara's eyes lit up like someone had plugged her into a socket. "Perfect. What's your name? Your real name?" Noelle looked at the empty doorway, thought of amber eyes that had dismissed her like furniture, and felt something reckless stir in her chest. Romeo. The universe had a sick sense of humor. The words slipped out before she could catch them. Juliet. She meant it as a private joke, a tiny rebellion, just for herself. But Chiara's face exploded with joy, her mouth falling open and her eyes going supernova. "Uncle Romeo!" The scream bounced off the high ceilings, sharp enough to shatter glass, and Noelle's blood turned to ice. "Uncle Romeo! Santa's name is Juliet!" Noelle lunged, grabbing for the girl, but Chiara was already off her lap, her bare feet slapping marble as she sprinted toward the door. "I was joking," Noelle's voice cracked. "Chiara!" Too late. Romeo appeared in the doorway, his brow creased, and those amber eyes swept the room before landing on the disaster by the fireplace. Chiara grabbed his hand with both of hers, bouncing on her toes. "Romeo and Juliet, like the movie. You have to meet her." His gaze shifted to Noelle. She was frozen in the armchair, beard askew, face burning hot enough to melt glaciers, and her mouth opened to explain, to apologize, to spontaneously combust, but nothing came out. He looked at her slowly, his eyes traveling up, down, back up, not with interest, not with curiosity, but more like someone examining a stain on an expensive carpet and deciding whether to burn the whole thing. Then he turned and walked away without a word, without acknowledgement, just gone. Chiara's face crumpled, her lower lip pushing out. He didn't even say hi. Noelle's voice came out strangled, her cheeks still radioactive. "I was joking. My name isn't Juliet. It's Noelle." Chiara spun around, her eyes narrowing to slits as her hands flew to her hips. "Are you joking now?" Noelle smiled despite herself and brushed her thumb gently over Chiara's cheek. "No, sweetie." "Santa's name is Noelle, like Christmas?" Chiara's head tilted with dramatic suspicion. Noelle's throat tightened unexpectedly, and she looked down at her ridiculous gloves. "I was found on Christmas. The orphanage named me." The suspicion melted from Chiara's face, replaced by something softer, sadder, older than 8 years should allow. And she climbed back onto Noelle's lap, slower this time, wrapping small arms around her neck. "You don't have parents?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Like me? My dad died." Noelle's chest constricted, and her arms came up automatically, wrapping around the small, warm body. "I'm sorry," she whispered back. Chiara pulled back, studying her with those ancient eyes. "You're like a Christmas princess, lost and alone. If you married Uncle Romeo, you'd be a queen." A nervous laugh escaped Noelle's throat, too loud in the quiet room. "I don't think your uncle wants to marry anyone. He likes strong women." Chiara lifted her chin with absolute certainty. Noelle gestured at herself. The ridiculous suit, the crooked beard, the boots destroying her feet. "I'm wearing a fake beard. Confidence is confusing to men." Chiara shrugged like this was obvious. Noelle stared at the 8-year-old philosopher, mouth hanging open. "Where did you learn that?" "Movies." Chiara shrugged again, then gave a quick, unapologetic wink. Before Noelle could respond, Chiara's eyes lit up. She scrambled off Noelle's lap and pointed at the tree. "Presents! Mrs. Santa should give them out!" Noelle's stomach dropped. "Oh no! Everyone, presents!" Chiara was already shouting, and Noelle heard footsteps approaching. Voices, the click of heels on marble. She rolled her eyes toward the ceiling, dread pooling in her gut. The kid was fine, great even, but those adults, Valentina with her polished smile, her fancy friends with their judgmental eyes, that terrifying bodyguard. And that? Romeo. The room filled quickly. Valentina settled into an armchair, wine in hand. 2 women in designer dresses flanked her, friends clearly with the same polished look. A massive man with a shaved head positioned himself by the door. Bodyguard, and then Adrian, younger, lighter, easy smile, who stood next to Romeo like a shadow. Romeo didn't look up from his phone. Noelle knelt by the presents, grabbed the first box, read the name, handed it over. Again, mechanical, quick. And then 1 box remained. Romeo. Her fingers tightened on the paper. Everyone else was absorbed in their gifts. Paper tearing, Chiara squealing over a stuffed unicorn. But between Noelle and Romeo, the air felt heavy. Noelle walked toward him. Romeo was still scrolling his phone, not even pretending to care. "This is yours." She held out the box. He took a single step toward her, close enough that she felt him, before she could think, close enough that his presence made her breath catch. His head tilted slightly as his eyes settled on her face, assessing, unreadable. Her pulse jumped. Her fingers loosened. The box slipped from her hands and hit the floor. She bent quickly to pick it up, and her sleeve snagged as she moved, sliding back before she could stop it. Her left wrist was exposed. The heart-shaped birthmark stood out dark against her pale skin. Romeo froze. He was staring at her wrist, those amber eyes fixed and unblinking, the color draining from his face like someone had pulled a plug, and she watched a muscle twitch beneath his left eye, just once, there and gone in half a second, but she saw it, saw him lose control for just that fraction of a moment. "You're present," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't take it, didn't move, and when he finally spoke, his voice was flat and cold, completely different from the man who had said with curves just an hour ago, "Wrong party." Then he turned and walked out, leaving her standing there with the box still extended and her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Nobody had noticed, nobody except her. That look on his face, wrong party, she didn't understand it then, but she would. Finally, Valentina approached with an envelope. "Thank you," she said flatly. "Chiara loved you. 300, as promised. And actually, my brother wanted to discuss some additional work. New Year's party. If you could wait in the study, down the hall, third door on the left." Noelle nodded because she needed the money, even as her pulse warned her that being alone with Romeo was the part she couldn't afford. And then Chiara was suddenly there, arms wrapping around her waist, hugging her tight as if Noelle belonged to her already. "I wish you'd fall in love with him," Chiara whispered, eyes shining with dangerous hope. "That's my New Year's wish." Noelle's chest ached as she watched the girl run off, telling herself not to get attached. She was here for $300 and nothing more. Noelle stopped at the threshold, her heart hammering beneath the ridiculous costume. The room was dim. Leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the amber glow of a single lamp. And standing by the window, his back to her, was Romeo. She swallowed hard, her throat clicking. "Hello?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "You wanted to speak with me?" He didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge her at all. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. "Come in." 2 words. Ice cold. A command, not a request. She stepped inside, her boots silent on the thick carpet. The door clicked shut behind her, and the sound of the lock sliding into place made her blood freeze. Romeo turned. Those amber eyes swept over her, clinical and cold, like a surgeon assessing where to cut. "Name." Noelle's fingers curled into fists inside her gloves. She forced herself to meet his gaze. Noelle. Noelle Adams." He moved toward her, slow, deliberate, like a predator circling prey. Each step brought him closer, and Noelle's pulse climbed higher. "Age." Her voice trembled despite herself, her knees threatening to buckle. 23. Actually, today's my birthday, December 24th. I turned 23. Something flickered across his face, too fast to read, before the mask returned. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. "Where do you live? Who is your family?" Noelle's spine stiffened, her chin lifting despite her terror. "Why are you asking me this?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that the air tightened between them, close enough that she caught the dark edge beneath the whiskey. Noelle drew a sharp breath, shoulders stiffening as she leaned back a fraction, her hands lifting instinctively to her chest. "What are you?" His finger touched her lips before the question could finish. Warm, certain, quiet. Then he pulled. Slowly. The adhesive tugged, stung, her breath hitched as the beard came away. Then the eyebrows, then the red velvet hat. Her hair spilled free, and his hand froze mid-air. Noelle stood frozen, her heart slamming against her ribs as her hair tumbled free, long chestnut waves spilling over her shoulders. Her green eyes were wide, her full lips parted in shock. Romeo's jaw tightened, his lips parted, like he was about to say something, but he stopped himself. His eyes traveled over her face, slowly, hungrily. Then the shutters came down, his expression hardening back to stone. "Who are you?" Heat flooded Noelle's cheeks, spreading down her neck. She stepped back, her legs hitting the chair. "I think I should go. I've done my job, sir. There's nothing else." His hand shot out, fingers closing around her upper arm. He pulled her toward him, close, too close, and his lips brushed her ear. The warmth of his breath sent electricity down her spine. "You don't leave until you answer my questions." Her pulse skyrocketed, pounding in her ears. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, the iron strength of his grip. "Take off the costume." Noelle's blood turned to ice. Her stomach dropped like she'd missed a step on the stairs. "Excuse me?" His grip didn't loosen, his voice didn't waver. "You heard me." She tried to twist free, her muscles straining against his hold. "Absolutely not. Who do you think you are?" His fingers tightened on her wrist, not painful but inescapable. Those amber eyes bore into hers, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. Not cruelty, something worse, desperation. "Either you take it off or I do." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "Do you understand how serious I am right now?" Noelle's chin lifted despite her terror, a spark of defiance cutting through the fear. "I thought this was your normal mood. You've looked like this since I walked through the door." A muscle ticked in his jaw, his nostrils flared. "You were watching me?" She exhaled shakily, her chest heaving with shallow breaths. "I wasn't watching anyone. You were standing right in front of me, sir." Silence stretched between them, thick enough to choke on. His eyes dropped to the buttons of her costume, waiting, patient as death. "Take it off." Her fingers trembled as she reached for the clasps. One by one, she undid them, the sound of each snap deafening in the silence. The red velvet fell away until she stood in just a white t-shirt and black leggings, vulnerable, exposed. Goosebumps erupted across her bare arms. Romeo's gaze dropped to her left wrist. The birthmark, heart-shaped, dark against pale skin. He reached out, slower this time, gentler, and took her hand in his. His thumb traced over the mark, feather-light, almost reverent. The touch sent heat blooming up her arm, into her chest. Noelle's breath caught, her lips parted. She didn't pull away. Then he released her and stepped back, his expression unreadable. The cold rushed back in where his warmth had been. "Sit." She sat. Her legs wouldn't have held her anyway. Romeo moved to a crystal decanter by the window, pouring himself a whiskey. His movements were slow, deliberate, a man buying time to think. The amber liquid caught the lamplight as it splashed into the glass. "Tell me about your family." Noelle's hands twisted in her lap, her knuckles going white. "My family is in Rochester." He swirled the whiskey, still not looking at her. His voice was flat, clinical. "Are you their biological child?" His gaze stayed fixed on the snow falling outside the window. Noelle watched the tension in his shoulders, the rigid line of his spine. "No, foster family." She paused, her brow furrowing. "Why would you ask that?" He ignored the question, took a slow sip. "Where did you grow up?" Noelle's jaw tightened. Her patience was fraying, thread by thread. "An orphanage. Until I was 8. Then I went to my family." Romeo set the glass down with a soft clink. The firelight caught the sharp angles of his face, shadows pooling in the hollows of his cheeks. Noelle couldn't take it anymore. She leaned forward in the chair, her voice rising. "Why are you asking me these questions? I just did a job. I was about to leave." He turned his head slightly, just enough to see her from the corner of his eye. "Who gave you this job?" Frustration burned hot in her chest. Her fingers dug into the leather armrests. "No one gave it to me. There was a flyer at the campus cafe. I found it myself." "Who do you live with?" The questions kept coming, relentless. Noelle's teeth clenched. 4 roommates. "Boyfriend?" Heat crept up her neck. She didn't know why that question made her flush. "No." She moved toward the door, her legs shaking. "Can I please leave now?" "No, Noelle." His voice dropped low, sending a shiver down her spine. "You can't leave." Her heart stopped. The blood drained from her face. "What?" He straightened, adjusting his cuffs like they were discussing dinner plans. Calm, infuriating. "You're staying here tonight. Someone will bring you food. The windows are alarmed. Don't try anything stupid." Panic clawed at her throat. She gripped the armrests, her knuckles white. "You can't. This is kidnapping." He didn't even blink. "Call it whatever helps you sleep." "Why? What did I do?" He paused at the door, his back to her. "I don't know yet." "You don't know?" He turned. Something shifted in those amber eyes, not softness, but calculation. "I will have a proposition for you in the morning." His tone was calm, deliberate. "Get some sleep. You'll need it." He reached the threshold, hand on the doorframe. Then he stopped. "Merry Christmas, Noelle." A brief pause, almost thoughtful. "And Happy birthday. The door closed. The lock clicked. Noelle Adams sat alone in a stranger's study, her Santa costume crumpled at her feet. No phone, no money, no way out, and no idea what she'd walked into. A proposition. What kind of proposition waits until morning? Outside the window, snow began to fall. She didn't sleep that night, and by morning she would realize that was the least of her problems. The fire had burned down to embers when she heard metal scraping against metal, the soft click of the doorknob turning. Noelle's heart slammed against her ribs as she scrambled off the couch and grabbed the nearest object, a heavy crystal paperweight that felt solid and reassuring in her trembling grip. She pressed herself against the wall beside the door, arm raised, ready to strike. If he thinks I'm going down without a fight. The door creaked open, spilling a sliver of golden light from the hallway, and a small figure slipped through the gap. Noelle's arm froze mid-swing, the breath rushing out of her lungs in a wave of relief and confusion. Kiara stood in the doorway wearing pink pajamas covered in cartoon unicorns, matching fuzzy slippers, and clutching a stuffed elephant to her chest like a shield. Her blonde hair was tangled from sleep, and her brown eyes went wide at the sight of the raised paperweight. "Are you going to hit me?" The crystal thudded to the carpet as Noelle's arm dropped, her shoulders sagging with the release of tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "I thought you were someone else." She pressed a hand to her racing heart, feeling it pound against her palm. "What are you doing here in the middle of the night?" Kiara padded into the room like she owned it, which, Noelle supposed, she technically did, her unicorn slippers squeaking softly on the hardwood floor before she climbed onto the leather couch and tucked her legs beneath her. "I couldn't sleep, and then I remembered you were still here, which means Uncle Romeo must really like you." Her brown eyes sparkled with something that looked dangerously like mischief. "Maybe he's in love with you." Heat crept up Noelle's neck despite the absurdity of the statement, and she shook her head to clear it. "Your uncle locked me in this room against my will. That's not love, that's kidnapping." The girl tilted her head, considering this with far more seriousness than any 8-year-old should possess, her small fingers playing absently with her elephant's worn ear. "Maybe it's both." Noelle's jaw tightened as she glanced at the door, still open, still unguarded, a tantalizing glimpse of freedom just steps away. "Kiara, I need your help." She crouched down until their eyes were level, her knees protesting against the hard floor. "You have a key. You got in here somehow. Can you help me escape?" The girl's face brightened like Christmas morning, and she reached into her pajama pocket to produce a brass key that glinted in the dying firelight. Noelle's heart leaped with hope as she reached for it. But Kiara pulled her hand back, the key disappearing into her small fist, and that too-old smile crept across her face. "I could give you this, but it wouldn't help you at all." Noelle's fingers curled in the empty air where the key should have been, her stomach dropping like she'd missed a step on a staircase. "What do you mean?" "There are guards everywhere. Marco watches the east wing, Tony watches the west, and there are cameras in every hallway and at every exit." Kiara counted on her small fingers with the casual ease of someone discussing the weather rather than a prison layout. "Even with this key, you wouldn't make it to the street before someone caught you." The hope that had bloomed in Noelle's chest withered and died, leaving nothing but cold ash behind. "And if Uncle Romeo catches you trying to escape?" Kiara paused, her brown eyes locking onto Noelle's with unsettling intensity. "He won't be mad at me. He'll be mad at you. Are you willing to risk that?" Noelle stared at this tiny blonde child in unicorn pajamas who spoke like a mob boss negotiating terms, and a hysterical laugh bubbled up in her throat. "What kind of family did I fall into? Is everyone in this house a psychopath?" "Even if I can't escape tonight," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her ribs, "I need to leave eventually. I have a life, school, friends, an apartment. I don't want you to leave." The words hit like a slap, and Noelle blinked at the sudden shift, mob boss to wounded child in the space of a heartbeat. Kiara's lower lip trembled, her eyes growing wet with unshed tears, and she hugged her stuffed elephant so tight its seams strained. "You just got here. And I finally found someone who actually sees me." Her voice cracked on the words. "Mommy's always busy with her friends, Uncle Romeo's always working, and the nannies just sit there staring at their phones while I play by myself." She looked up at Noelle with those two old eyes shining in the firelight. "But you played with me at the party. You laughed at my jokes. You're the first person in forever who didn't treat me like I was invisible." Something cracked in Noelle's chest. A hairline fracture spreading through walls she'd built over 23 years of being the invisible girl, the orphan nobody wanted, the foster kid people looked right through. "She's just a lonely kid, like I was," she thought. But this situation was still absolutely insane. "Kiara, honey, I understand being lonely, I really do, but I can't stay here as a prisoner just because—" "Then don't be a prisoner." The calculating gleam returned to Kiara's eyes, tears evaporating like morning dew. "If Uncle Romeo likes you, you won't be a prisoner. You'll be a guest, and guests can stay as long as they want." Noelle's stomach twisted at the implication, and she pulled back slightly. "I can't just make someone like me." Kiara hopped off the couch with renewed energy, brushing her hands together like she'd just solved a complex equation. "I'll help. That's what I'm good at. First step, you need better clothes than that." She bounced toward the door before Noelle could process what was happening, her unicorn slippers squeaking against the floor. "Wait!" Noelle lunged forward, grabbing the doorframe. "The key! Give me the key! Even if I can't escape, I don't want to be locked in here alone all night." Kiara paused at the threshold and turned, that unsettling smile spreading across her cherubic face. "Nice try." A chill ran down Noelle's spine as the girl slipped through the door, and before she could react, the lock engaged with a decisive click. She yanked the handle with all her strength, but it didn't budge. "Chiara!" A giggle filtered through the wood. Light, musical, absolutely infuriating. "I'll be back in the morning with something pretty. Sweet dreams." Footsteps padded away down the hallway, growing softer and softer, until they disappeared entirely, leaving Noelle alone with the dying fire and her racing thoughts. She pressed her forehead against the cold wood of the door, her fingers white-knuckled on the handle, and whispered to the empty room, "The whole family is criminal, even the 8-year-old." Morning arrived grey and cold, a pale, reluctant light seeping through the windows like a witness that wished it hadn't seen anything at all. Noelle had eventually passed out on the couch, boots still on, fear never quite loosening its grip. The sound of a key turning snapped her awake, her body reacting before her mind caught up as she scrambled upright, heart hammering. Kiara burst in as if it were any other morning, bright-eyed, unbothered, carrying a bundle of red fabric that caught the dull light and turned it vivid. "I brought clothes!" Noelle's shoulders sagged with relief as she stood, her stiff muscles screaming in protest, and reached for the bundle. "Thank God! I was freezing all night. Hand me the—" The fabric unfurled in Kiara's arms, and Noelle's hands froze mid-reach. It was not jeans. It was a gown, deep red satin with thin straps, a plunging neckline that would leave very little to the imagination, and a slit that would reach mid-thigh. Her jaw dropped as her brain struggled to process what she was seeing. "What is that?" Kiara beamed and held it up like a trophy, clearly pleased with herself. "A dress! Isn't it gorgeous?" Noelle's eye twitched, and her hands balled into fists at her sides as frustration bubbled up through her exhaustion. "I asked for jeans, a sweater, something warm." The girl shrugged with complete indifference and tossed the gown onto the couch like it was a dish rag rather than what was obviously a designer piece worth more than Noelle's entire wardrobe. "This is prettier." Noelle picked up the dress with trembling fingers, the fabric slipping through her hands like cool water, and spotted the designer label peeking from the collar. Her stomach plummeted as realization dawned. "Where did you get this?" "Mommy's closet." Ice flooded Noelle's veins and her grip tightened on the satin. "You stole from your mother?" Kiara crossed her arms and lifted her chin with the defensive posture of someone who knew they were guilty but refused to admit it. "Borrowed. It's completely different." "She won't notice." Kiara rolled her eyes with the exasperation of a teenager rather than a 6-year-old. "She has like 100 dresses in that closet. and she hasn't worn this one in forever. Noelle sank onto the couch, the red gown pooling in her lap like spilled wine, and pressed her palm to her forehead where a migraine was building behind her eyes. "I can't wear this." Chiara climbed onto the couch beside her, small fingers reaching out to stroke the luxurious fabric with obvious admiration. "Why not?" "Because it's a gown, for galas and red carpets and fancy parties, not for sitting in a study as a prisoner." "You won't be sitting in the study much longer." Chiara's eyes sparkled with excitement. "When Uncle Romeo sees you in this dress, he's going to fall in love with you." The words were so earnest, so childishly certain, that Noelle didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Chiara, that's not how it works. Put it on, please. I want to see." Noelle sighed, too exhausted to fight any more. She stood and held the gown against her body, the satin cool against her skin. "Fine. Turn around." Chiara spun to face the wall, bouncing on her heels with impatience. Noelle peeled off her wrinkled t-shirt and leggings, goosebumps erupting across her skin in the cold morning air, and stepped into the red dress. The fabric slipped over her curves like water, clinging in all the wrong places, or all the right ones, depending on who was looking. "Can I turn now?" "Yes." Chiara whirled around and gasped, her small hands flying to her cheeks. "You look like a princess." Before Noelle could respond, the girl scooped up the discarded t-shirt and leggings from the floor. "What are you doing with my clothes?" "These are dirty. I'll get them washed." Chiara was already skipping toward the door, Noelle's only other clothes bundled in her arms. "I'll go tell Uncle Romeo you're awake." "Chiara, give those back!" The door closed behind her. Noelle stood frozen, barefoot in a stolen red gown, her everyday clothes gone, with nothing left but silk and skin. Criminal. The whole family is criminal. She looked down at herself, plunging neckline, thigh-high slit, curves on full display, and felt heat creep up her neck. A proposition, Romeo had said last night, and now she was dressed like a woman waiting to be propositioned. Noelle paced the length of the study, the red silk whispering against her bare legs with every step. She'd tried the door twice, unlocked, but where would she go dressed like this, into a mansion full of guards, wearing a stolen gown and no shoes? She was trapped, not by locks this time, but by silk and circumstance. Then she heard it, the soft scrape of a key, the click of the handle. Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack bone. The door swung open. And there he was. Those amber eyes found her immediately, swept from her bare feet up the endless red silk, lingered on the plunging neckline, and finally locked onto her face. Something flickered in his gaze. Heat. Hunger. Gone before she could name it. Noelle stood frozen in the center of the room, dressed in nothing but stolen crimson silk, every curve on display, feeling more naked than if she'd worn nothing at all. A proposition, he'd said last night, and now she understood exactly what she looked like. A gift, wrapped in red, waiting to be unwrapped. Noelle lifted her chin despite her hammering heart, refusing to be intimidated. "Nice dress." His voice held no inflection, no hint of what he was thinking. Her nails dug into her palms, leaving crescents in the soft flesh. "Your niece made me wear it and stole my clothes so I couldn't change." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "Runs in the family, apparently, the criminal streak." His lips twitched in what might have been amusement on anyone else's face. "She's efficient." He stepped inside and the door clicked shut behind him. The sound echoed through the study like a gunshot. Noelle's breath caught as he moved deeper into the room, each step deliberate, until only a few feet separated them. Noelle Adams. His voice was flat, clinical. 23 years old, bank account balance, $47, foster family in Rochester, broke, haven't called you in months. You're a sociology major at NYU, working at a campus cafe, a library, and whatever hourly jobs you can find between classes. Her blood ran cold. Each word landed like a slap. You share an apartment with 4 other students. You haven't paid rent in 2 months. Your landlord is about to evict you. His amber eyes pinned her in place. You're barely staying on your feet. Am I wrong? Noelle's hands trembled at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. How do you know all this? He ignored the question. I have a proposition that could solve all your problems. He paused, letting the silence stretch. You're going to marry me. Tomorrow. The world tilted. Her ears rang. What? Marry me. 1-year contract. A hysterical laugh escaped her throat before she could stop it. Why would I marry someone like you, a stranger who kidnaps women and locks them in his study? Romeo's expression didn't change. And why would someone rich and handsome want you? She froze. Had she said that out loud? Heat flooded her cheeks. Something shifted in his face, not quite a smile, but close. So, you find me attractive. Good. His eyes swept over her once, dismissive. I find you acceptable. Noelle's jaw clenched, humiliation burning through her veins. This is insane. What's really going on here? Her voice rose, cracking. Are you going to sell me to organ traffickers? Ship me overseas? What do you want from me? Romeo closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hand came up, fingers gripping her chin, tilting her face toward his. His touch was firm but not painful, controlled, like everything else about him. Much simpler than that. His voice dropped to a murmur, his breath warm against her skin. You'll be my wife. You'll live in this house. You can continue your studies if you want, but you don't leave without my guards. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. Why would I ever agree to this? Because your life is miserable. He released her chin, but didn't step back. And because I'm offering you $1 million, deposited into your account the day we marry. 1 million. The number hung in the air between them. The marriage lasts 1 year. After that, we can divorce if you choose. His eyes held hers. 1 year of your life for financial freedom forever. Think about it. Noelle's mind raced, trying to process, trying to find the trap. I don't understand. Why me? Why? I don't have time for more questions. He was already turning toward the door. I have business to handle. Think carefully, Noelle. He paused at the threshold, looking back over his shoulder. I'll return in 2 hours, and we'll arrange the wedding. The door closed behind him. No lock, no click, just silence. Noelle stood frozen in her stolen red dress, her chin still tingling where he'd touched her, his words echoing in her skull. $1 million. 1 year. Marry me. She looked down at her wrist, at the birthmark she'd carried since birth. What wasn't he telling her? The black Mercedes pulled away from the mansion, tires crunching on snow as Romeo settled into the leather seat. Andre's hands tightened on the steering wheel, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. Boss? Why 1 year? Romeo's jaw tightened, gaze fixed on the snow-covered trees blurring past. 1 year is enough to crush the Falcones completely. We need time. If that girl is Bella Falcone and they find her, every scattered member of that family will rally around her. Victor Falcone's bloodline, his direct heir, risen from the dead. They'll unite, they'll strengthen. The car turned onto the main road. Romeo's voice dropped, fingers drumming once against his thigh. December 24th, 2002. The night the Falcone compound burned. She's 23. Birthday on December 24th. Andre's knuckles went white on the wheel, but he said nothing. Romeo's gaze drifted to some point beyond the snow-covered trees, his voice dropping to something quieter, more distant. Before my father died, he told me about that night, about the child he found in the wreckage, around 3 years old, with a heart-shaped birthmark on her wrist. His jaw tightened, a muscle flickering beneath the skin. He left her on the doorstep of an orphanage, couldn't bring himself to finish what the fire started. He turned back to the window, a muscle jumping in his cheek. And that same girl walked through my door last night dressed as Santa Claus. A dark laugh escaped his lips, humorless and cold. Do you believe in fate, Andre? Andre met his eyes in the mirror, expression unchanged. No, boss. I believe in actions and consequences. Romeo didn't respond. His fingers stilled on his thigh, and in his mind he saw her, the red silk dress, chin lifted, fear burning in her green eyes, but refusing to look away. Actions and consequences indeed. Noelle wore a path into the carpet, pacing back and forth, her boots clicking against the hardwood, while her hands refused to stay still, rubbing together, tugging at her sleeves, pressing briefly to her temples where a headache was blooming. Her thoughts kept circling the same questions with no answers in sight. A soft knock stopped her mid-step. "Noelle?" Chiara's small voice slipped through the door. Relief loosened something in Noelle's chest as she crossed the room and rested her palm against the cool wood. "Chiara? Come in, sweetie." "I can't." The apology in the girl's voice was immediate. "They took my key. I'm not allowed inside anymore." Noelle swallowed. Even the child wasn't free. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." A faint rustle followed, Chiara shifting her weight. "How are you?" Noelle let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh, her forehead dropping gently to the door. "I have to make a decision, and I don't know what the right one is." There was a pause. Then Chiara spoke again, her voice steady in a way that didn't belong to someone so young. "My dad used to say something before he died. He said you survive this family by acting like you belong. You don't push back. You blend in." Noelle's fingers curled against the wood. "But you belong here. You're a Marchetti, too." "No," Chiara answered without hesitation, pride clear even through the door. "I'm a Remington, my dad's daughter. Mom and Uncle Romeo are the Marchettis, not me." Her voice softened then, and Noelle felt small fingers brush the other side of the door. "I think you're going to be a Marchetti soon, and I think that's good, because then you won't leave." Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Adult. Deliberate. "I have to go," Chiara whispered quickly. "But whatever you decide, I hope you stay." The footsteps moved on. Noelle remained where she was, forehead resting against the door, the words "my father's daughter" echoing in her mind. She'd never been anyone's daughter, never had a name that belonged to her, or a past that reached back farther than an orphanage doorstep. She crossed to the window and wrapped her arms around herself. Snow fell quietly over the immaculate grounds, calm and untouched, and as she watched it drift down, the chaos in her chest slowly settled into something clearer. She'd survived her entire life alone. Maybe that was the problem. Her shoulders straightened, resolve taking shape as she whispered into the empty room. "Fine, Romeo Marchetti. If this is the hand I've been dealt, I'll play it." She turned back toward the door. 2 hours later, the door opened. Romeo stepped inside and stopped short when he saw her standing by the window, bathed in grey winter light, her posture completely different from the terrified girl he'd left, shoulders pulled back, chin lifted high, green eyes meeting his without flinching. Something flickered in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation he immediately pushed aside. His head tilted slightly, studying her. "You look calmer." Noelle walked toward him with steady steps, closing the distance until only a few feet separated them. "I've made my decision. I accept. But I have conditions." His eyebrow arched, arms crossing over his chest. He hadn't expected conditions. Her hands clasped in front of her, knuckles white, but voice clear. "First, you don't touch me. This is a business arrangement, nothing more." He inclined his head once, a single sharp nod of acceptance. "That can be arranged. No physical contact unless you initiate it." Noelle's chin lifted, her eyes flashing with defiance. "That's never going to happen, so we're clear on that front." Something flickered across Romeo's face, amusement perhaps, or challenge, but he said nothing, simply waited for her to continue. "Second, I continue my education. Classes, exams, everything. You'll have security with you at all times, but yes, you can continue your classes." His shoulder lifted slightly, as if the concession cost him nothing. "Third," she took a breath, and for just a moment her mask slipped, vulnerability flickering across her features before she locked it down. "After 1 year, I walk away. Free and clear. No questions, no complications. You let me go." Romeo studied her for a long moment, expression unreadable, one finger tapping slowly against his bicep before he finally spoke. 1 year, and then you're free to walk away. I accept those terms." She blinked, clearly surprised. Her weight shifted back. "That's it? You've stated your terms." "I've accepted them." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Did you expect me to be more difficult?" Her cheeks flushed and she looked away, fingers fidgeting with the fabric of her dress. "I suppose I expected more of a negotiation, or at least some resistance." "I can be, if you'd prefer." The word came out too quickly, and Noelle felt the flush deepen across her cheeks as she shook her head. "That won't be necessary. We have a deal, and I'd rather not complicate things further." He turned toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. "Do you want a wedding dress?" Noelle looked down at the red gown she was still wearing. Valentina's dress, stolen by Chiara, never hers. Her fingers plucked at the silk with distaste. "No wedding dress, but I'm not getting married in someone else's clothes. I want something that's mine, something I chose." Romeo turned back slowly. His amber eyes traveled down her body, from her face to her throat, her shoulders, the curve of her waist, lower, then back up again, deliberate, assessing, like he was cataloguing every inch of her. Noelle's skin prickled, heat crept up her neck. She felt stripped bare even though she was fully clothed, and her arms crossed instinctively over her chest. His voice dropped, low and controlled. "You can't leave the house until after the ceremony. I'll choose for you this time." His eyes held hers, something dark flickering in their depths. "After we're married, you'll have all the time you want to pick your own clothes." She swallowed hard, refusing to look away despite the heat crawling across her skin. His lips curved, not quite a smile. "You're different than you were last night." The girl in the Santa costume was scared, desperate. Her chin lifted another fraction. "I'm still scared, but I've been desperate my whole life. I've learned to be scared and strong at the same time." Something shifted in his expression, there and gone, like a shadow passing over water. "You don't know me." Her voice hardened, arms dropping to her sides, hands curling into fists. "And frankly, you're barely acceptable by my standards either, so don't flatter yourself too much." Silence hung between them, thick and charged. Then Romeo's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. He turned and stepped into the hallway, and she heard him address someone, a housekeeper. "Have food sent to her room. Give her the large bedroom in the east wing. Make sure she's comfortable." His voice carried back to her, cool and commanding. "She's going to be Mrs. Marchetti. Treat her accordingly." Noelle's breath caught, her hand flying to her throat. She was really doing this. The room was obscene, obscenely large, obscenely luxurious. The bed alone was bigger than her entire apartment, silk sheets in cream and gold, a fireplace crackling with actual flames. She filled the marble tub, stripped off Valentina's red dress with a sigh of relief, and sank into water hot enough to turn her skin pink. Her muscles unclenched one by one, and for a moment, just a moment, she let herself float. When she emerged, wrapped in the fluffiest towel she'd ever touched, a box sat on the bed. Glossy black, tied with white ribbon, bearing a logo she recognized from magazines she'd never been able to afford. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid. Ivory silk caught the light like liquid moonlight, the design simple yet elegant in a way that made her breath catch. The kind of dress she'd only ever seen in magazine spreads, never imagined touching, let alone wearing. Beside it lay strappy heeled sandals in matching cream, and beneath those a velvet jewelry box. She opened it with shaking fingers. Diamonds, a delicate necklace, matching earrings that sparkled even in the dim winter light. A card lay on top, the handwriting bold and angular. 7 p.m. The main salon, family only. Romeo. She sank onto the edge of the bed, the dress pooling in her lap like water, her heart pounding against her ribs. The door swung open without a knock. Valentina swept in, heels clicking against marble, and stopped at the sight. Noelle wrapped in a towel, wet hair dripping, the open gift box spread across the bed like evidence. A slow, mocking smile curved her lips, one hand coming to rest on her hip. "Well, well, I never imagined I'd see Romeo get married." She circled the bed, one manicured finger trailing over the diamonds. "And to someone like you? I couldn't have predicted this in a million years." Noelle stood her ground, gripping the towel tighter, spine straightening. Valentina's smile faded, replaced by something harder. She stepped closer, dark eyes narrowing. "It won't be easy for you here. Romeo is difficult. The Marsetti family is difficult. Our world doesn't forgive weakness." Her head tilted, predatory. "Can you handle it?" Noelle met her gaze without flinching, jaw tight. "I assume you know this is an arrangement, a business deal, and I'm more resilient than I look." Something flickered in Valentina's eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Her lips pressed together briefly before she moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the frame. "You're lucky Chiara likes you. That child has a soft spot for strays. But don't expect me to make things easier for you." She glanced back over her shoulder, smile razor sharp. "You'll earn your place here, or you won't survive it." The door clicked shut. Noelle stood alone, surrounded by silk and diamonds and the lingering scent of expensive perfume, her heart pounding against her ribs. The war hadn't even started yet, and she was already behind enemy lines. Noelle gripped the banister as she walked down the staircase, the ivory silk sliding against her skin, diamonds catching the chandelier light. Romeo stood at the base. The moment she appeared, something shifted in his posture. He coughed into his fist, his gaze darting toward the window before snapping back. His fingers found his tie and adjusted it, even though it was already straight. Chiara noticed everything. When Noelle reached the bottom step, Chiara threw her arms around Noelle's waist. "You look so beautiful," she spun toward Romeo. "Uncle Romeo, doesn't Noelle look so pretty? You're like Romeo and Juliet, like in the movies." Valentina's hand landed on Chiara's shoulder. "Your nanny has been letting you watch too many movies, darling." The officiant cleared his throat and gestured toward the fireplace. The ceremony passed in a blur. Noelle stood beside Romeo, close enough to feel his warmth, close enough to catch the subtle scent of his cologne, cedar, and something darker. When the officiant asked for the rings, Romeo pulled out a velvet box. The diamond inside was enormous. He took her left hand and slid the ring slowly onto her finger. His amber eyes lifted to meet hers. "This man is my husband now," she thought, the words feeling foreign and impossible even inside her own head. "This stranger, with his cold eyes and his secrets and his world, I don't understand." She kept her chin lifted high, refusing to let any of them see how close she was to falling apart. Valentina's voice cut through the moment like a blade slicing silk. "The Marsetti name carries weight. I hope you're strong enough to bear it." Romeo's head snapped toward his sister, something dangerous flickering in his expression, his jaw tightening until a muscle jumped beneath the skin. "Leave her alone, Valentina. She's one of us now." Chiara's voice piped up. "Okay, pose for a wedding photo. I want to take a picture." Romeo's jaw remained tight. "That's not necessary." The little girl's lower lip trembled with expert precision. "Please? Just one photo? For me?" Something in Romeo's expression softened. He moved to stand beside Noelle, and his hand came to rest at the small of her back. Warm, steady. She couldn't stop herself from turning to look at him. He met her gaze. For Chiara. That's all. But his hand didn't move from her back. Chiara bounced excitedly. "Perfect. Now get a little closer, and now kiss." Heat flooded Noelle's cheeks as she stepped back. "I think that's enough photography." A waiter appeared with champagne. As Noelle reached for a glass, Romeo's eyes lifted to meet hers, and for just a moment, something almost soft passed across his features. "I've always liked birthmarks. They make people unique, special in a way that can't be faked." It wasn't really an answer, and they both knew it, but before Noelle could push further, Valentina called for a toast, and the moment was gone. Noelle stood in the middle of the elegant salon, surrounded by flowers and candles and people whose world she didn't understand, and felt the wrongness of it all pressing against her chest like a physical weight. She didn't belong here. She was a college student with $47 in her bank account and a rented Santa costume stuffed in a locker somewhere, not a woman who wore diamonds and married dangerous men in candlelit ceremonies. "If you'll excuse me." Her voice came out steadier than she'd expected, and she set her untouched champagne on a nearby table. "It's been a long day." She climbed the stairs without looking back, feeling their eyes on her the entire way up. The moment the bedroom door closed behind her, Noelle turned the lock and pressed her back against the wood, her legs finally giving out beneath her. She slid down until she was sitting on the cold marble floor, still wearing the ivory silk dress, still wearing the diamonds, still wearing the ring that felt like a shackle on her finger. The tears came without permission, hot and silent, tracking down her cheeks and dripping onto the expensive fabric pooled around her legs. She didn't bother wiping them away. There was no one here to see, no one to perform for, no one expecting her to be strong. "This is a good deal," she reminded herself, the words feeling hollow even as she thought them. "He's giving me money, security, a way to finish my education. This is the smart choice." But all she could feel was the weight of the ring on her finger and the ache of loneliness that no amount of money could fix. Eventually, she crawled into the enormous bed without bothering to change out of her dress, pulling the silk covers up to her chin and staring at the ceiling with burning eyes. A soft knock at the door made her freeze, her breath catching in her throat. "Noelle," Romeo's voice came through the wood, low and quiet. "May I come in?" She didn't answer, didn't move, just pulled the blankets tighter around her body and squeezed her eyes shut. In another life, maybe. A life where she'd met a man she loved, a man who loved her back, a man whose eyes held warmth instead of secrets. Maybe then she would have opened the door. But this was not that life, and he was not that man, and the best thing she could do was keep as much distance between them as possible. His footsteps didn't retreat immediately, and she could picture him standing there on the other side, one hand perhaps pressed against the door, trying to decide whether to knock again or walk away. The seconds stretched into minutes, and still he stayed, and still she lay frozen beneath the covers, hardly daring to breathe. Then another set of footsteps approached, lighter, quicker, and Chiara's voice drifted through the door, bright with curiosity. "Uncle Romeo, are you and Noelle going to sleep in the same bed tonight? That's what married people do in the movies." A long pause stretched through the silence, and Noelle pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. Romeo's voice came back tinged with exhaustion. "Chiara, it's well past your bedtime, and you shouldn't be concerning yourself with adult matters." "But I saw how you looked at her at the wedding." Chiara's voice got that know-it-all tone that 8-year-olds use when they think they've figured something out. "You like her, I can tell. You wouldn't marry someone you don't like." Silence stretched again, heavy with things unsaid. "I'm 8, Uncle Romeo, not a baby. I know when a boy likes someone." The little girl's voice dropped to a whisper, like she was sharing a secret. "There's this boy in my class, Travis, who pulls my hair and makes fun of my shoes and sticks his tongue out whenever I catch him staring. That means he likes me." Another pause, longer this time. "Also," Chiara went on, "you're wearing that fancy cologne, the one you only wear for special stuff. I smelled it when you walked past my room this morning." Noelle pressed her hand harder against her mouth, her shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter despite the tears still drying on her cheeks. Romeo's voice came back flat and dangerous, but Noelle could hear the undertone of something softer beneath it. "Chiara, I'm driving you to school tomorrow morning, and I think I'd like to have a conversation with this Travis. Also, I'll be speaking with Louisa about your media consumption. No more television." Chiara's giggle echoed down the hallway as she scampered away, her voice floating back to them. "Television? What century are you living in, Uncle Romeo? It's called YouTube." Romeo let out a tired sigh, loud enough to hear through the heavy wooden door. "Women," she heard him mutter, and then finally his footsteps moved away down the corridor. Noelle lay in the darkness, her tears drying on her cheeks, and for the first time since she'd arrived at this mansion, she felt a genuine smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Chiara might be the only person in this entire house capable of handling Romeo Marchetti, and somehow that knowledge made everything feel slightly less impossible. Sleep refused to come. She tossed and turned until the covers were tangled around her legs, her mind racing through everything that had happened: the Santa costume, the party, Chiara's laughter, Romeo's cold eyes, the ring now weighing heavy on her finger. None of it made sense, and the questions kept spiraling through her head, refusing to let her rest. Finally, around 4 in the morning, she gave up. She needed water, or maybe just the simple act of movement, anything to quiet the chaos in her mind. The house was silent as a tomb as she padded down the hallway in bare feet, the thin fabric of her nightgown offering little protection against the chill that seemed to seep from the marble walls. She was halfway to the kitchen when she noticed the light spilling from Romeo's study, the door left slightly ajar. Curiosity tugged at her, stronger than caution. She approached slowly, pressing her palm flat against the wood and pushing it open just enough to peer inside. The room was empty. Romeo's leather chair pushed back from the desk, a half-empty glass of whiskey abandoned beside a stack of papers. Before she could think better of it, Noelle slipped through the doorway and crossed to the desk. Papers covered every surface: contracts, reports, financial documents she didn't understand and didn't care to examine. But one item caught her attention. A leather-bound notebook lay open on the blotter, its pages covered in handwriting. Her eyes scanned the page, and her blood turned to ice in her veins. Noelle Adams. Born December 24th, 2001. Foster care system: St. Mary's Orphanage. Then various placements. Currently enrolled at State University. Distinguishing marks: heart-shaped birthmark on left wrist. Each item had a small check mark beside it, neat and precise. And below, underlined twice in possibly Romeo's hand, Bella Falcone? A question mark hung at the end. But somehow that single piece of punctuation made everything worse instead of better. The sound of the front door opening made her heart stop dead in her chest. Noelle moved on instinct, slipping out of the study and pressing herself flat against the wall of the corridor just as footsteps approached from the foyer. She made it to the base of the staircase before Romeo appeared, and she froze like a deer caught in headlights. He was wearing workout clothes, grey sweatpants slung low on his hips, a fitted t-shirt dark with sweat, his hair damp and dishevelled from what must have been an early morning run. He stopped short when he saw her, his eyes travelling slowly down her body, the thin nightgown that suddenly felt far too revealing, her bare feet against the cold marble, the way the fabric clung to curves she usually kept hidden beneath layers of practical clothing. Their eyes met across the shadowed foyer, and neither of them moved. Noelle didn't wait to see what he would say. She turned and fled up the stairs, her heart pounding against her ribs, not stopping until she was safely behind her locked door, with her back pressed against the wood and her chest heaving with each ragged breath. Who is Bella Falcone? The question burned through her mind like wildfire. But underneath the confusion, underneath the fear, one thing stood out. The way his eyes had moved over her body, the heat in his gaze, the way her skin had flushed and her pulse had raced and her stupid heart had skipped several beats. This man had some strange power over her, something that made her knees weak and her resolve weaker, and she had no idea how to fight it, or if she even wanted to. The morning after her wedding, Noelle woke up to screaming. She followed the noise downstairs. Chiara sat at the dining table, arms crossed, glaring at a plate of eggs. The nanny looked ready to cry. "I don't want eggs!" Noelle leaned against the doorframe. "What's going on?" Chiara's face lit up. "Noelle!" She launched across the room and slammed into Noelle's waist. "You're still here!" Noelle smoothed a hand over Chiara's hair. "I told you I'd stay." "I know, but sometimes people say stuff and don't do it." She pulled back, eyes shining. "But you're really here." Noelle crouched down. "I'm here. Now. What's wrong with eggs?" Chiara wrinkled her nose. "They're gross. I want waffles." "I make good waffles." Noelle looked at the nanny. "Take a break. I've got this." Martha fled like she'd been pardoned. Romeo was at the front door, coat on, keys in hand, when he heard the laughter. He stopped, turned his head toward the kitchen. Through the gap in the hallway, he could see them. Noelle at the counter, flour on her cheek, Chiara perched on a stool watching her like she was performing magic. They were laughing. the kind he hadn't heard from Chiara since her father died. His hand tightened on the door handle. He should leave. He had meetings, important ones. But his feet wouldn't move. He watched Noelle flip a waffle onto a plate, watched Chiara take a bite and melt into the counter with happiness, watched the easy way they moved around each other, like they'd known each other for years. An unfamiliar ache stirred behind his ribs. He pulled out his phone, his voice low. "It's me. Cancel my afternoon meetings. All of them. I'll be heading home early today." He slipped out the front door before either of them could see him. After breakfast, Chiara grabbed Noelle's hand. "I want to show you the house. You've only seen like 3 rooms." The tour moved fast. Guest bedrooms, a library with walls of books, a home theater bigger than Noelle's old apartment. Chiara narrated everything like a tiny real estate agent on caffeine. Then she pulled Noelle through a set of glass doors, and Noelle stopped breathing. The winter garden. Glass walls, stone floors, green everywhere despite the snow outside. A fireplace crackling in the corner. And orchids, dozens of them lining every surface, purple and white and pink. "This is Uncle Romeo's favorite place," Chiara whispered. "He takes care of all the flowers himself. Nobody else can touch them." Noelle walked along the rows, fingers hovering over the petals. Romeo, orchids, the man who says hurt him without blinking, grows flowers. His name is kind of romantic, right? Chiara tilted her head. Like Romeo and Juliet. But he's not romantic at all. He's grumpy and never smiles. Noelle traced a finger along the edge of a pot. Maybe he has hidden depths. What's that mean? Chiara scrunched her nose. Noelle looked at the orchids. Delicate things surviving in a glass cage. It means sometimes people are more complicated than they look. Chiara's bedroom was purple. Aggressively, enthusiastically purple. Walls, bedding, curtains, rug, everything. "Lilac is my favorite color," she announced, throwing herself onto the bed. But Noelle wasn't looking at the walls. She was looking at the photograph on the nightstand, a man with sandy hair and kind eyes holding a younger Chiara in his arms, both of them laughing, the man pressing a kiss to her forehead. Chiara saw her looking. Her face changed. "That's my dad." Her voice got quieter. Noelle sat on the edge of the bed, leaving space between them. "He looks nice." "He was the best." Chiara picked at a thread on her comforter. "He died 2 years ago." Noelle reached out, her hand settling gently on Chiara's hair. "I'm sorry. Everyone says that." Her voice went flat. "Then they look at me like I'm going to break. But I'm not going to break. I'm tough." She looked up, and for a moment she didn't look like a child at all. "They think I don't know stuff, Mom and Uncle Romeo. They whisper when I'm around and stop talking when I come in." Her small hands curled into fists on her lap. "But I hear things. I'm not stupid." Something cold slid through Noelle's stomach. "What kind of things?" "They told me my dad died in a car crash." Chiara's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "But I heard Uncle Romeo on the phone once. He said, the Falcones will pay for what they did to Richard Remington. So it wasn't just a crash. They killed him." The name hit Noelle like ice water. Falcone. The same name in Romeo's notebook. Next to a question mark. Next to hers. "Who are the Falcones?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Bad people. The worst." Chiara's eyes hardened in a way that made her look just like her uncle. "Uncle Romeo hates them. I hate them too. They took my dad away from me." Noelle sat very still, her mind racing. Bella Falcone. That's what he wrote. Bella Falcone with a question mark next to my name. Chiara's face lit up with mischief. "Uncle Romeo's room." Noelle's stomach flipped. "I don't think—" "Come on." She was already off the bed, grabbing Noelle's hand. "He's not here, and you're his wife. Wives are allowed everywhere." The door to Romeo's bedroom was locked. But Chiara crouched down, her small fingers finding a loose floorboard near the baseboard. She pried it up and pulled out a brass key, holding it up with a grin. "He thinks this is a super-secret hiding spot." She rolled her eyes. "But nothing stays secret from me." Noelle glanced down the empty hallway. "Chiara, I really don't think we should go inside." "You're his wife." The girl was already fitting the key into the lock. "Married people don't have secrets. My dad told my mum that once. I heard him through the door." The lock clicked. The door swung open, and Noelle smelled him. That cologne, the one she'd noticed the first moment she walked into this house. Fresh at first, like clean air after rain, but underneath, something darker, mysterious, a secret wrapped in a scent. It smells like his eyes look, she thought, and then immediately wanted to slap herself for thinking something so stupid. The room was large but surprisingly simple, a massive bed with charcoal grey sheets, perfectly made, heavy curtains blocking most of the winter light, everything clean, organized, controlled, just like him. Chiara flopped onto the bed, bouncing. "See? Boring. He's so boring. Not even one poster on the walls." But Noelle had already drifted toward the walk-in closet. She didn't mean to. Her feet just carried her there. Rows of suits hung in perfect order. Black, charcoal, navy. Dress shirts arranged by color. Ties on a rotating rack. Everything pressed and pristine. Her fingers reached out before she could stop herself, brushing against the sleeve of a jacket. The fabric was soft, expensive. It smelled like him. She leaned closer. "Just for a second. Just to—" "You're smelling his clothes." Noelle jumped, spinning around. Chiara stood in the closet doorway, arms crossed, smile enormous. Her face burned. "I wasn't." "You totally were. You were smelling them." The girl's grin got wider. "You like him. I knew it. I knew you liked him." Heat flooded Noelle's cheeks. "I was just looking." Chiara pointed at her face. "Your face is super red." Noelle touched her cheek. "It's warm in here." "It's literally freezing." Chiara gestured at the window. "There's snow outside." Noelle took a breath, stepping away from the clothes, away from the scent, away from whatever temporary insanity had made her lean into a jacket like a crazy person. She turned to face Chiara. "I don't like him. I barely know him." "But you could like him." Chiara tilted her head. "And I think he likes you. He looks at you different." Noelle crossed her arms. "Different how?" "I don't know. Just different." She shrugged. "Like he's trying to figure something out." Before Noelle could respond, a bell chimed somewhere in the house. 3 clear tones. Chiara's face fell. "That's my tutor. I have lessons." She dragged her feet toward the door, then paused. "Will you still be here when I'm done?" Warmth bloomed behind Noelle's ribs. "Yeah, I'll be here." Chiara smiled and disappeared down the hallway. Noelle stood alone in Romeo's closet, surrounded by his scent, and realized she didn't want to leave. The snow was falling harder when Noelle stepped outside. She'd meant to just walk a little, clear her head, but her feet carried her across the frozen garden without permission. The cold bit at her cheeks, her fingers, the tip of her nose. She'd forgotten to grab a coat. But the cold felt good. Real. It reminded her of winters in the foster homes, the ones with broken heaters, the ones where she'd sleep in 3 sweaters because no one bothered to fix anything. The ones where she'd learned that nobody was coming to save her, so she'd better save herself. And now, she was here. This massive estate with heated floors and silk sheets, and a husband who looked at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. How did I get here? She wandered back inside, her skin pink from the cold, and found herself in the winter garden again. The fire was still crackling, the orchids were still blooming. Everything was warm and green, and nothing like the frozen grey world outside. She sank into one of the armchairs by the fireplace, pulling her legs up to her chest. The heat seeped into her bones, thawing the chill. Just for a minute, she thought, her eyes growing heavy. Just for a minute. Romeo came home at 3. The house was quiet. Too quiet. He checked the kitchen first. Empty. Her bedroom, the door open, the bed made. No sign of her. His fingers curled inside his pockets, his jaw tightening as the question burned through him. Where the hell was she? He walked faster now, room after room, his footsteps sharp against the marble. Nothing. A flicker of something he refused to call panic sparked in his chest. She couldn't have left. The guards would have reported it, unless... He pushed through the glass doors of the winter garden and stopped. She was there. Curled up in the armchair by the fireplace, her legs tucked beneath her, her head resting against the cushion. Asleep, in his favorite spot, surrounded by his mother's orchids. The tension drained from his shoulders. He stood in the doorway, watching her breathe. Her face was different in sleep, softer, the wariness gone, the defiance erased. She looked young, vulnerable. Nothing like the girl who'd stood up to him, or the nervous bride who'd signed her name next to his. She looked like someone who needed protecting. Dangerous thought. Romeo crossed the room silently and draped a cashmere blanket over her, careful not to wake her. She stirred slightly, a small sound escaping her lips, then settled deeper into the chair. He should have stepped back, should have walked away. Instead, he found himself leaning closer, his face inches from hers. A strand of hair had fallen across her cheek. His fingers moved before he could stop them, brushing it back, tucking it behind her ear. His thumb lingered near her jaw. His gaze dropped to her lips, soft, slightly parted. His fingers hovered there, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath. He didn't touch. He couldn't. Romeo pulled back like he'd been burned, his jaw tightening as he shoved his hands into his pockets. What the hell are you doing? Keep your friends close. Keep your enemies closer. His father used to say that. Antonio Marchetti, who'd built this empire from nothing, who'd taught Romeo everything about power and control. But what do you do when you can't tell the difference? This girl, this Noelle Adams who'd stumbled into his life dressed as Santa Claus, might be the daughter of the legendary Falcone leader, the man who had united all the Falcone families under one roof, the heir to everything he was trying to destroy. And she had no idea. A muscle twitched near his eye. She can never find out. He would do whatever it took. Lie to her, manipulate her, keep her trapped in this golden cage until the Falcones were nothing but ash. And if somewhere along the way he started to feel something for her, enemies don't get to be anything else. He turned and walked away, leaving her alone with the fire and the orchids and the snow falling softly against the glass, and Romeo intended to keep it that way. The days after Christmas settled into a strange kind of rhythm. Romeo was a ghost, glimpses around corners, his cologne lingering in empty rooms. Valentina was away on business trips more often than not, leaving Chiara with her nanny and, increasingly, with Noelle. The girl was constant, demanding, dragging Noelle into board games and baking disasters and movie marathons that ended with her head on Noelle's shoulder. It was the closest thing to family Noelle had ever known. December the 30th arrived cold and grey, the sky heavy with clouds that promised more snow. Noelle had just settled into her favourite armchair in the library, a cup of tea warming her hands, when the door swung open without warning. Romeo stood in the doorway, still wearing his coat, snowflakes melting in his dark hair. He looked like he'd just come from somewhere important, and had taken a detour specifically to find her. Noelle straightened, tea sloshing close to the rim. In the week since their wedding, he'd barely spoken 10 words to her. He stepped inside, pulling off his gloves. Tomorrow night, there's a gala, New Year's Eve. Business associates, politicians. His eyes met hers. You'll attend as my wife. The textbook slipped from her fingers. I thought this was a contract marriage, paper only. He moved further into the room, dropping his gloves on a side table. I said no touching. I didn't say no appearances. People expect to see you. Noelle opened her mouth to argue, but he was already turning away. We leave at 7. I'll have someone take you shopping tomorrow. Shopping for what? He paused at the door. A dress, something appropriate. And then he was gone, leaving Noelle alone with her cooling tea and the unsettling feeling that she'd agreed to something far more complicated than a party. The boutique didn't have prices on anything. That was the first thing Noelle noticed. No tags, no signs, just racks of silk and satin in every color and sales assistants who spoke in hushed, reverent tones. Romeo had come with her. He sat in a velvet armchair near the dressing rooms, legs crossed, scrolling through his phone with the ease of a man who'd spent his entire life in places like this. He hadn't asked Noelle's opinion once. She stood in front of a three-way mirror now, drowning in emerald silk. The dress was beautiful, deep green that made her eyes glow, backless, elegant lines that hugged her body in ways her thrift store clothes never had. But the sleeves were long, very long. They covered her wrists completely, the fabric extending past her palms in delicate points, just like every other dress he'd approved. Noelle turned slowly, watching her reflection, and felt the realization click into place. Every single one covered her wrists. He's hiding my birthmark. She met Romeo's eyes in the mirror and froze. He wasn't looking at her face. His gaze had dropped to her bare back, tracing the line of her spine where the fabric dipped low, exposing skin she'd never shown anyone. His phone lay forgotten in his lap, and something dark flickered in those amber eyes. Heat rushed to Noelle's cheeks. She turned away quickly, pretending to adjust the fabric at her hip, but she could still feel his stare burning into her skin. This one. His voice was rougher than before. Noelle turned to face him, silk swishing around her ankles, her cheeks still warm. I thought I'd at least get to choose my own dress. He settled back into the chair, expression unchanged, but his jaw was tighter now. You can choose the shoes. She should have argued, but as she opened her mouth, she caught something in the mirror, a flicker at the corner of his lips, almost imperceptible. Gone before she could be certain. Did he just smile? Fine, she said, smoothing her hands over the silk. This one. Romeo nodded and returned to his phone, and Noelle pretended she couldn't feel his eyes on her as she walked back to the dressing room. The gala was held in a penthouse overlooking the city. Even after a week in the Marchetti mansion, this was something else entirely. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the glittering skyline, a carpet of lights stretching to the horizon. A jazz quartet played in one corner, the music drifting beneath the hum of conversation. Waiters in white jackets circulated with champagne and tiny, perfect appetizers. The guests looked like they'd stepped from a magazine, men in designer suits worth more than cars, women dripping with diamonds that caught the light like frozen fire. And everyone was watching her. She felt the stares as soon as they walked through the door. The whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. Marchetti's new wife. So young. Where did he find her? Then Romeo's hand slid around her waist. She stiffened, his palm warm through the silk, fingers spreading across her hip with possessive familiarity. More touching than they'd done in their entire marriage, and he was doing it in front of hundreds, like it was the most natural thing in the world. His lips brushed her ear. Relax. Everyone's watching. That's the point. Noelle forced herself to lean into his touch instead of pulling away. A performance. That's all this was. A silver-haired man approached first, his smile wide and practiced. He extended his hand to Romeo. Congratulations on the marriage. She's absolutely lovely. Romeo's grip tightened on her waist. Thank you, Senator. More people followed. More congratulations, more handshakes, more eyes crawling over her like she was an exhibit in a museum. Romeo answered questions, made introductions, always referring to her as my wife, never Noelle, like her name was irrelevant, like the only thing that mattered was her relationship to him. After an hour of smiling until her face ached, she escaped to the bar, while Romeo got pulled into a conversation with men who looked like they owned small countries. The bartender slid a glass across the polished wood. Noelle picked it up, took a long sip, let the bubbles burn her throat. Your eyes are extraordinary. She turned, glass halfway to her lips. The man was tall, early 30s, with dark hair and a sharp jaw. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Green, the exact same shade as hers. The dress matches them perfectly, he continued, leaning against the bar with easy confidence. I noticed you the moment you walked in, like a beacon. Noel's fingers tightened on her glass. Thank you. He extended his hand, green eyes never leaving her face. I'm Adrian Falcone. Falcone. The name hit her like ice water. Chiara's voice echoed in her memory. The Falcones killed my daddy. And the champagne turned to acid in her stomach. This was one of them. The people who'd murdered Chiara's father. She took his hand, briefly, barely, and pulled back. Noel. I know. Adrian's smile widened. Romeo Marchetti's mysterious bride. The whole city's talking about you. He tilted his head, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to step back. How old are you, if you don't mind? A hand closed around her elbow, pulling her back. She minds. Romeo appeared at her side, his grip firm, angling her body away from Adrian. His other hand found her waist, pulling her close. Adrian didn't flinch. If anything, his smile sharpened. He slid his hands into his pockets, completely at ease. Romeo, just introducing myself to your lovely wife. Romeo's jaw tightened. You've introduced yourself. His voice was perfectly calm, perfectly controlled, and somehow more threatening for it. Now leave. Adrian raised both hands in mock surrender, stepping back, but his green eyes stayed locked on Noel. It was a pleasure meeting you, Noel. I hope we see each other again. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Romeo's grip on her waist tightened to the point of pain. Noel twisted to look at him. Who was that? Though she already knew, though the answer was written in every line of his suddenly rigid body, his jaw clenched, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. No one you need to know. He steered her toward the windows, away from the crowd. When I'm not with you, don't talk to anyone, especially not him. She pulled against his grip. But why? Don't. The word cut like a blade. Just don't. She wanted to push, to demand answers, but something in his face stopped her. Not just anger, something that looked almost like fear. Adrian has the same eyes as me. She pushed the thought down immediately. Coincidence. Just coincidence. They left before midnight. The city streamed past the Mercedes windows. Romeo sat rigid, staring out at the passing streets. Noel pressed her forehead against the cold window. Why did we leave early? I had to be there. I don't have to ring in the new year with them. Midnight matters to me. Her finger traced a pattern in the condensation. Stupid superstition. But I've always believed however you spend midnight is how you'll spend the year. She smiled, but it felt brittle. Last year, I was alone eating ramen. Year before, working a double shift. She pulled her hand back. I know it's silly, but just once, I wanted to start a year feeling like I wasn't completely alone. Then, his fingers brushed hers. Just a graze, but the touch sent a shiver down her spine. Slowly his hand settled over hers, warm, calloused, impossibly gentle. She looked at him. The hardness had left his face. He was watching her with those amber eyes, and for the first time, he looked almost uncertain. He lifted her hand, exposing her inner wrist, and pressed his lips there. A kiss so light she barely felt it. Then he leaned closer. His lips brushed her cheek, soft, warm, lingering for exactly one heartbeat. Happy New Year, he murmured against her skin. Somewhere in the distance, fireworks exploded. The dashboard clock flicked to 12 o'clock. Romeo released her hand and turned back to the window. Noel sat frozen, her cheek burning where his lips had been. He kissed me at midnight. For the first time in 23 years, she hadn't started a new year alone. Hope. Dangerous, terrifying, wonderful hope. The kiss haunted her. Noel lay in bed watching the grey morning light creep across the ceiling, but all she could see was his face in the dark of the car. The way his fingers had curled around hers, the press of his lips against her wrist, that strange, tender kiss on her birthmark, and then her cheek, soft and warm, and over too soon. She touched the spot now, fingertips tracing where his mouth had been. It meant nothing. A moment. New Year's Eve sentimentality. But her body didn't believe it. Her body remembered every detail. His cologne, the heat of his hand, the rough edge of his voice when he'd said, "Happy New Year," like it was something sacred. She threw off the covers, annoyed with herself. The mansion smelled like fresh coffee and warm pastries. Noelle followed the scent downstairs and found the dining room transformed, platters of fruit and croissants and eggs, winter sunlight streaming through the windows. Chiara spotted her before she'd taken 3 steps into the room, shooting out of her chair and grabbing Noelle's hand. "Noelle, sit next to me!" She tugged Noelle toward the table, nearly bouncing with excitement. "We're having a family breakfast for New Year's." Valentina looked up from her coffee, one perfectly shaped eyebrow arching. She wore cream cashmere, her dark hair swept into an elegant twist, and her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, Noelle, do join your family." She lifted her cup, took a delicate sip. "Temporary as it may be." Noelle's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to smile as she slid into the chair beside Chiara. Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy. Deliberate. Romeo descended with a phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. He wore a charcoal sweater with the sleeves pushed up, revealing the corded muscles of his forearms, and his expression was the same as always, hard, focused, untouchable. He ended the call as he reached the table, his eyes sweeping the room and pausing for just a fraction of a second on Noelle before moving on. "Good morning." He pulled out the chair directly across from her and sat. Noelle reached for a croissant. So did Romeo. Their fingers brushed over the bread basket, his knuckles grazing hers, and the touch sent a jolt through her like static electricity. She froze. He froze. Their eyes met across the table, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved. His gaze dropped to her mouth, just for a second, then back up. Noelle pulled her hand back like she'd been burned, heat flooding her cheeks. She grabbed the nearest thing, a bread roll she didn't want, and busied herself with tearing it into pieces. "Can we go ice skating today?" Chiara's voice cut through the tension, her hands clasped together as she turned pleading eyes on the table. "Please? There's an outdoor rink in the park." Valentina set down her coffee cup with a soft clink. "I have meetings today, darling. Maria can take you." "But Maria's boring." Chiara's face fell, her lower lip pushing out. "She just sits on the bench and plays on her phone." "I could take her." The words were out before Noelle could think better of them. Everyone turned to look at her. Valentina with cool surprise, Romeo with something unreadable, Chiara with dawning hope. Noelle shrugged, suddenly aware of the weight of their attention. "I'm going crazy sitting around here anyway, and my classes start tomorrow, so this is my last free day." "Really?" The girl's face transformed into pure sunshine as she grabbed Noelle's arm. "You mean it?" "Sure, why not?" Valentina waved a dismissive hand, already reaching for her phone. "Fine by me." Romeo set down his coffee cup, the ceramic clicking against the saucer with quiet finality. "With guards?" Noelle opened her mouth to argue, but something in his expression stopped her cold. This wasn't a discussion. This was an order. She swallowed her protest. "Fine, with guards." They were walking back to the car, Chiara still chattering about hot chocolate, when the black SUV came out of nowhere. Tires screeching, doors flying open, men in dark clothes, faces covered, moving fast, too fast. One of them grabbed Chiara. The girl screamed, high and piercing, and something snapped inside Noelle. Her body moved on pure instinct, years of foster homes flooding back, years of learning to fight because no one else would protect her. She kicked hard, her boot connecting between the man's legs with everything she had. He doubled over with a howl of agony, his grip loosening, and Noelle threw herself over Chiara, shielding the girl with her own body. "Don't move!" She pressed Chiara's face into her jacket, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Stay down!" Gunshots exploded behind her, the guards sprinting toward them, firing as they ran, and chaos erupted across the rink, people screaming, scattering in every direction. A fist slammed into her mouth. Pain exploded through her skull, white-hot and blinding. She tasted copper, felt warmth running down her chin, but she didn't let go, couldn't let go. Rough fingers grabbed her arm, dragging her backward, and her sleeve rode up in the struggle. exposing her wrist. The man's eyes dropped to the birthmark, heart-shaped, dark against her pale skin, and he froze. Something changed in his face. Shock, recognition. He reached for his radio. At that exact moment, the screech of tires cut through the chaos. A black Mercedes skidded to a stop, and Romeo was out before it had fully parked, his door slamming open as he sprinted toward them with a fury that transformed his face into something terrifying. His fist connected with the man's jaw, a sickening crack that sent him sprawling across the pavement. "Boss? No!" Adrian's voice rang out from somewhere behind. "Get back!" Romeo didn't listen. He grabbed the man by his collar, hauling him up for another blow. The gunshot split the air. Noelle screamed. Romeo staggered, his hand flying to his shoulder where crimson was already blooming through the fabric of his coat. But he didn't fall. His eyes found the shooter, and even bleeding, even wounded, the look on his face made the man stumble backward in pure terror. The other guards opened fire, bullets tearing through the air as the attackers scrambled for their SUV. People were screaming, running, the peaceful afternoon dissolving into pandemonium. The black SUV peeled away, tires screaming against asphalt. And then it was over. Romeo turned immediately, his wounded arm hanging at his side, blood dripping onto the snow as he crossed to where Noelle still crouched over Chiara. He dropped to his knees beside them, his good hand cupping Chiara's face first, checking her eyes, her head, her limbs. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, cracking at the edges. "Chiara, look at me. Are you hurt?" The girl shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks, and Romeo's eyes closed for just a second, relief so profound it looked like pain. Then his gaze shifted to Noelle, her split lip, the blood running down her chin, the way she was shaking so hard she could barely hold herself upright. His jaw turned to stone. "Adrian!" The name came out like a whip crack. "Get Chiara to the car, now!" Adrian scooped Chiara into his arms, and Romeo reached for Noelle, lifting her like she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest as he strode toward the Mercedes. She could feel his heart pounding through his coat, could smell his cologne mixed with copper and gunpowder, could feel the warm wetness of his blood seeping through her sleeve where her arm pressed against his shoulder. "You're bleeding." Her voice came out thin, trembling. "Romeo, you're—" "It's nothing." He set her in the back seat, sliding in beside her as Adrian took the wheel with Chiara in the front. It didn't go in. The car pulled away, and Romeo's hand was already reaching into his pocket, pulling out a silk handkerchief. He turned to her, his fingers tilting her chin up, and began dabbing at her split lip with a gentleness that seemed impossible from hands that had just broken a man's jaw. A muscle twitched beneath his left eye. His jaw was so tight she could see the cords standing out in his neck. "I gave you my best men." His voice was quiet, too quiet, as he looked at Adrian in the rearview mirror. "I told you to protect them with your life. If I can't protect my family, what's the point of all this power?" Romeo's hand stilled against Noelle's cheek, and she felt the tremor running through his fingers. "What's the point of any of it?" "My family." The words hit her somewhere deep. She stared at him, this man who'd thrown himself into gunfire without hesitation, who'd taken a bullet to reach them, whose eyes were filled with a raw fear she'd never seen before, not for himself, for them, for Chiara, for her. "You're hurt." She reached for him, her fingers hovering over the bloodstain on his shoulder. "Romeo, you're bleeding." "I said it's nothing." But his voice was softer now, his eyes dropping to her mouth, to the blood still oozing from her lip. A small sound came from the front seat. They both looked up. Chiara had stopped crying. She was twisted around in her seat, watching them with wide eyes that sparkled with something unexpected. "Noelle?" A hiccup, then a wobbly smile. "You kicked that man, right between the legs." Her voice rose with admiration. "Did you see how he fell down? He was screaming like a baby." Noelle stared at the girl, caught off guard by the shift. Yes, I suppose I did." "It was awesome." Chiara wiped her nose with the back of her hand, a giggle escaping through her sniffles. "Can you teach me how to do that?" Noelle glanced at Romeo, who was watching his niece with something softening in his expression. Relief, maybe, that she wasn't traumatized beyond repair. "I see your fear has passed." Noelle managed a shaky smile of her own. Romeo shook his head slowly, and when he spoke, there was warmth buried beneath the exhaustion in his voice. Marchetti women. Noelle's breath caught. Marchetti women. He was including her. After everything, the contract, the coldness, the walls he kept between them, he was calling her one of them. She didn't know what to do with that, didn't know what to do with any of this. So she just sat there, Romeo's bloodied handkerchief pressed to her lip, and watched the city blur past the window as they raced toward home. The study was warm, firelight flickering across the dark wood and leather furniture. Romeo had dismissed everyone else. Valentina to comfort Chiara, Adrian to coordinate security, the guards to patrol the perimeter. Just the two of them now. Noelle sat on the leather couch, a first aid kit open beside her as Romeo knelt in front of her. His coat was gone, his shirt bloodied, but he'd refused to let anyone touch his wound until he'd taken care of her first. His fingers tilted her chin up, examining her lip under the lamplight. This close, she could see the gold flecks in his amber eyes, could smell cedar and something darker beneath the copper scent of blood, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "This will sting," he murmured. The antiseptic burned. Noelle hissed but didn't pull away, watching his face as he worked. His jaw was tight, a muscle twitching beneath the skin. He looked like he was barely holding something back. When he finished, his thumb brushed just below her wounded mouth, lingering there. "Your turn." Her voice came out huskier than she intended. "Take off your shirt." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe, or something hotter. But he didn't argue. His fingers moved to his buttons, undoing them one by one, and Noelle's mouth went dry as the fabric parted to reveal what lay beneath. Golden skin stretched over muscle, his chest broad and defined, his stomach ridged with the kind of abs that came from discipline, not vanity. The bullet had grazed his shoulder, leaving an angry red furrow that was still oozing blood, but Noelle barely registered it. She was too busy trying to remember how to breathe. He shrugged the shirt off completely, and she caught his scent, stronger now, cedar and musk, and something uniquely him that made heat pool low in her belly. "Focus, he's injured." She reached for the antiseptic, her hands trembling slightly as she pressed the cotton to his wound. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just watched her with those amber eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "You threw yourself in front of a bullet." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You could have died." "I've had worse." His voice was low, rough. "That's not an answer." His hand came up, fingers wrapping around her wrist, not stopping her, just holding on. "You threw yourself in front of my niece. You took a punch meant for her." Noelle swallowed hard, her pulse racing beneath his grip. "That's different. Is it?" The question hung between them, heavy with something neither of them was willing to name. She finished cleaning the wound and reached for a bandage, but her hands were shaking too badly to apply it properly. Romeo's fingers covered hers, steadying them, guiding the bandage into place. His touch was warm, his skin impossibly soft over all that hard muscle. When they finished, neither of them moved. He was so close, close enough that she could count his eyelashes, could see the faint stubble along his jaw, could feel his breath warm against her lips. His gaze dropped to her mouth, to the cut that was already swelling. Noelle. Her name was a rasp, a warning, a prayer. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. His lips stopped a breath away from hers, close enough to feel the heat of him, but not touching, not quite. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her uninjured cheek. His gaze dropped to her lips, lingering there, and his thumb traced the curve of her uninjured cheek. His breath was warm against her mouth, the distance between them shrinking with every heartbeat. So close, his jaw tightened. A war playing out behind those amber eyes, want against control, heat against ice. Then he pulled back, and the loss of his warmth felt like stepping into a snowstorm. When he spoke again, his voice had hardened, the mask sliding back into place. "You're not leaving this house until the threat is handled." He stood, reaching for his ruined shirt. Your classes will have to wait. The spell shattered. Noelle stiffened, the familiar frustration rising in her chest. That wasn't our deal. The deal has changed. He looked down at her, and despite the coldness in his voice, she could still see the echo of what had almost happened burning in his eyes. They came for my family. His jaw was tight, a vein pulsing in his neck. My wife. My niece. This isn't a threat anymore. This is war. Until it's over, you don't leave this house. He walked out before she could argue, leaving her alone with the fire and the first aid kit, and the ghost of his almost kiss still tingling on her lips. She touched her mouth, wincing at the sting. Marchetti women. She was in so much trouble. Sleep wouldn't come. At 3 a.m., Noelle gave up fighting. She crept downstairs in just a thin t-shirt and pajama pants, her feet bare on the cold marble, and made her way to the winter garden. It was her favorite room in the mansion. Glass walls, tropical plants, a stone hearth where the fire had burned down to glowing embers. She loved the silence here, the way the orchids seemed to breathe in the darkness. She trailed her fingers along the white petals, trying to quiet her racing thoughts. Couldn't sleep? She spun around. Romeo stood in the doorway, shirtless, just grey sweatpants hanging low on his hips, revealing the V of muscle at his waist and the planes of his chest. His skin glistened with a thin sheen of sweat, like he'd just come from a workout, and the dying firelight painted him in shades of gold and shadow. Noelle's mouth went dry. She stepped back, nearly tripping over a planter. I like being alone here. The quiet helps me think. He moved into the room, slow, deliberate, a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. You've been avoiding me. His eyes held hers as he came closer. Are you running from me, Noelle, or are you afraid of me? She lifted her chin, refusing to back down even as her pulse raced. I've been living with strangers for 10 days, in a house I don't know, with people I don't understand. Her voice wavered but didn't break. What exactly do you expect me to feel? Something shifted in his expression, curiosity, maybe, or respect, and he closed the distance between them until she could feel the heat radiating from his bare skin. What can I do? His voice dropped, low and rough, as his fingers brushed a strand of hair from her face. To make you feel more at home? Her breath caught. The way he was looking at her, like she was something he wanted to devour, made her knees weak. What you did today was brave. His thumb traced circles on the inside of her wrist, right over her birthmark, the touch feather-light and impossibly intimate. You protected Chiara. You could have been killed. I love her. The words came out steadier than she felt. His body was so close now she could smell him. Cedar and musk, and something darker. His free hand came up, fingertips grazing along her jaw, tilting her face toward his. And what else do you love in this house? The question hung between them, charged and dangerous. Noelle's heart was racing, her skin burning everywhere his fingers touched. No one else here seems to want to be loved. Something flickered in his eyes. His fingers traced along her chin, hovering over her wounded lip. Does it still hurt? She shook her head. A lie. He leaned down. Her palms pressed flat against his chest, warm skin stretched over hard muscle to stop him. But the contact only made everything worse. Heat flooded through her, pooling low in her belly, making her legs tremble. I should go. Breathless. Barely a whisper. She pulled free and fled. She ran up the stairs and down the hall, her bare feet slapping against the marble until she reached her room and slammed the door behind her. Her back pressed against the wood, her chest heaving, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Safe, she told herself, gasping for breath. You're safe now. The door flew open. Noelle stumbled backward, 2 steps, 3, her breath catching in her throat as Romeo filled the doorway. The look in his eyes stopped her cold, raw hunger, burning need, the kind of desire that devoured everything in its path. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him with a soft click. Then his mouth was on hers, hungry, demanding, giving her no time to think or protest or breathe. Her palm connected with his cheek, the sound echoing through the darkness. She turned away from him, her chest heaving, her hand stinging from the impact. "Don't." For a moment there was only silence. Then she felt his hands grip her hips from behind, and before she could react, he pressed her against the wall, her back flush against his chest, her palms flat on the cold surface, his body pinning her in place. "The deal was no touching," she breathed, her voice trembling. "You promised me." His lips brushed against her ear. "I know." His hands slid under her shirt, warm palms moving slowly against her bare skin, trailing fire up her ribs, climbing higher with agonizing patience. A sound escaped her throat, something raw and needy that she'd never heard herself make before. "I changed my mind," he whispered, against the curve of her neck. "The rules just changed." He turned her to face him, her back against the wall, his body caging her in. She could feel his heartbeat where his chest pressed against hers. Her palms flattened against his bare chest, not pushing away but pulling closer. Her hips shifted against him before her mind could catch up. She froze. Romeo's eyes darkened. He'd felt it. He knew. His thumb traced her bottom lip. "Tell me you don't want this." She couldn't. The words wouldn't come. "Tell me to stop." His lips found the curve of her neck, his teeth grazing her pulse point. "Say the word Noel. I'll walk out that door." "Stop," she whispered. But her fingers hooked into the waistband of his sweatpants and pulled him closer, her body betraying every rational thought in her head. He laughed against her throat, low and dangerous. "Liar." He lifted her off the ground and her legs wrapped around his waist as he carried her to the bed. His body covered hers, heavy and warm and overwhelming. When he pulled her shirt over her head, she trembled beneath him. Romeo went still, his hand cupping her face. "Has anyone ever touched you before?" She shook her head, and something primal flickered in his eyes, possession and hunger, and something that should have terrified her, but only made her want him more. He bent slowly, pressing his lips to the inside of her wrist, right over the birthmark, soft at first, then warmer, his tongue tracing the delicate skin. Noelle gasped, her hips lifting toward him, a breathless moan slipping from her lips. His breathing turned ragged as he lowered his mouth to her ear. "Do you want to be my wife? Really mine. Not contract. Mine." Logic had abandoned her completely. "Yes," she breathed. "Say it again." "Yes." It came out as a moan, lost against his shoulder as her nails raked down his back. "Take me. Now." He silenced her with his mouth. The darkness swallowed them both, her gasps mixing with his groans, two bodies learning each other for the first time. She arched into him, and he whispered her name like a prayer, and when release finally crashed over them both, Noelle understood with absolute clarity. There was no going back from this. Noelle woke to winter sunlight streaming through the curtains. She was naked beneath sheets that smelled like him. Her body ached in places she'd never ached before, a delicious soreness that made heat bloom in her cheeks. And there, beside her, lay Romeo, asleep, bare-chested, one arm thrown possessively across her waist. She stared at the ceiling, her mind slowly catching up with her body. What did I do? The contract, the agreement, no touching, no real marriage. She'd given him everything, her first time, her only time. And now what? Was this a real marriage? Was she in love with him? Was he? Romeo stirred beside her, his arm tightening, pulling her closer in his sleep. Noelle pressed her hands over her face. What happens now? The question echoed in Noelle's mind as she lay there staring at the ceiling, too afraid to move. Romeo's arm was still draped across her waist, heavy and possessive even in sleep. The sheets smelled like him, like them, and her body ached in ways she'd never experienced before. She turned her head slowly, watching him sleep. His face was relaxed in a way she'd never seen when he was awake. The hard lines of his jaw softened, the tension gone from his brow. She studied the scar along his ribs, the dark sweep of his lashes, the way his chest rose and fell with each slow breath. This cold, expressionless man. How did he become someone so passionate? Her fingers traced the edge of his jaw, feather light, afraid to wake him. Last night played through her mind in fragments, his body pinning hers against the wall, the roughness of his hands, the unexpected tenderness after. How he'd whispered her name like it meant something, how he'd held her like she was precious, breakable, his. I never want to leave this bed. The thought should have terrified her. This was a contract, a transaction, a year of her life traded for her father's debts, but lying here in the warm tangle of sheets with his arm heavy across her waist, she couldn't bring herself to feel anything but this strange, dangerous peace. His hand shot out. Before she could react, Romeo pulled her toward him in one fluid motion, flipping her onto her back and settling his weight over her. His eyes were open, amber and burning, fully awake, and the corner of his mouth curved as he looked down at her startled face. "Good morning." His mouth found hers before she could answer. The kiss was deep and demanding, his tongue sliding against hers like he was starving for her. Noelle's hands came up to grip his shoulders, her body responding before her mind could catch up, heat pooling low in her belly. He pulled back, his breath warm against her lips. "I can't get enough of you." Something in her chest tightened. She kissed him back, but hesitantly, her fingers trembling where they touched his skin. Romeo went still. He pulled away just enough to look at her, his brow furrowing. "Do you regret it?" His voice was quiet, careful. "Last night?" Noelle looked away, her cheeks burning. "We barely know each other, Romeo." She swallowed hard, searching for the right words. "I always thought, when I finally did this, it would be with someone I loved." Silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. When she gathered the courage to look at him again, his expression had gone cold, that familiar mask sliding back into place. Her heart sank. But then, slowly his lips curved. Not quite a smile, but something close. His lips traced a path down her neck, trailing with deliberate slowness. Across her collarbone, lower. He brushed against the swell of her breast and whispered against her skin. "Love. They make too much of that word." Noelle bit down on her lower lip as his mouth continued its path, her fingers tangling in his hair. Heat spread through her body like wildfire, burning away every rational thought. What is this man doing to me? Her back arched off the bed, a soft moan escaping her lips. He lifted her then, pulling her up until she straddled him, her thighs bracketing his hips. His hands gripped her waist, guiding her, and they found their rhythm together, slow, deep, devastating. "Tell me what you feel." His voice was rough, strained. "Right now, does this feel good?" She couldn't answer, couldn't think, could only feel. "Look at me." His hand cupped her jaw, tilting her face toward his. "Look at me, while I'm inside you." Her eyes met his, amber fire consuming her whole. "What we feel right now?" His voice dropped to a whisper, ragged and breaking, his hips moving in a rhythm that made her gasp. His breath shuddered against her neck, his fingers digging into her thighs like he was drowning, and she was the only thing keeping him afloat. "If this isn't love," a groan tore from his chest, low and desperate, "then what is it?" Something broke inside her. Noelle stopped fighting, stopped thinking, let herself fall. She melted into him, kissing him with everything she had, desperate and hungry and aching for more. Her nails raked down his back, her breath coming in ragged gasps against his mouth. Let this last forever. She buried her face in his neck, trembling, as the world shattered around them both. When she woke again, the sun had climbed high in the sky. Noon light flooded the bedroom, harsh and unforgiving. Noelle blinked against the brightness, her body heavy with satisfied exhaustion, and reached across the tangled sheets. Empty. She sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest, and found Romeo across the room. He was already dressed, dark slacks, white shirt, sleeves rolled to reveal his forearms, his phone pressed to his ear. His back was to her, tension visible in the rigid line of his spine. "I'm on my way." His voice was ice, nothing like the man who'd whispered in her ear an hour ago. "Keep him there, and Marco. Hurt him a little before I arrive. I want to ask the questions myself." Noelle's blood ran cold. This man is really mafia. He really does dangerous things. She pulled the sheet tighter around herself, her fingers white-knuckled against the silk. Romeo ended the call and crossed the room, sitting on the edge of the bed beside her. His hand found her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin with unexpected gentleness, a stark contrast to the words he'd just spoken. "I have to go." His voice was softer now, but his jaw remained tight. "Don't leave the house, Noelle. Not for a few days. Everyone's safety matters until I handle some things." She stared at him, her heart pounding against her ribs. The question escaped before she could stop it. "Have you ever killed anyone, Romeo?" His hand stilled on her face. Those dark eyes held hers for a long moment, unreadable, fathomless, giving nothing away. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her forehead, his lips lingering against her skin. "Tonight." His voice was a low promise. "We'll pick up where we left off." And then he was gone. Noelle paced the length of the bedroom, her bare feet cold against the marble, her arms wrapped tight around herself. "What am I doing here?" She crossed to the window and flattened her palm against the cold glass. Her breath fogged the surface. Outside, guards patrolled the grounds. Black SUVs sat in the circular driveway. The mansion was beautiful, yes, but it was also a cage. All I ever wanted was a normal life, a degree, a job, someone to come home to. She leaned her forehead against the glass, the cold biting into her skin. Instead, she'd married a man who ordered people to be hurt like he was discussing the weather, a man whose enemies tried to kidnap children, a man who made her feel things she'd never felt before and terrified her in equal measure. No one was watching her room. Noelle moved before she could change her mind. She slipped into Romeo's study, her heart hammering as she eased open the desk drawers. Papers, files, a gun that made her stomach lurch, and there, her phone, the one they'd taken when she first arrived. She grabbed it and fled to her room. Her own clothes felt like armor. Jeans, a simple t-shirt, her cheap winter coat with the broken zipper. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror and almost laughed. After all those silk dresses and diamonds, she looked like herself again. The girl who took a Santa job for $300. The back garden was empty. Noelle ran across the frozen grass toward the stone wall that bordered the property, 8 feet high, weathered stone covered in dead ivy. A large oak tree grew nearby, its bare branches reaching over the top like skeletal fingers. She climbed. Her fingers scraped against rough bark, her muscles burning with effort. The cold bit through her thin coat. Her foot slipped once, twice, but she kept going, higher, higher, until she straddled the top of the wall. She paused there, looking back at the mansion. Tears blurred her vision. Chiara will look for me. She'll think I abandoned her, just like everyone else in her life. Her hand flew to her chest, clutching at the ache beneath her ribs. She could still feel him, his hands on her body, his voice in the dark, his scent still clinging to her skin even in the cold morning air. After last night, after this morning, she knew she was falling in love with him. Maybe she already had. But I can't stay. She couldn't live in this world of guns and guards and enemies, couldn't fall deeper in love with a man she might lose to violence any day. I can't watch him die. I can't watch her get hurt. Noelle dropped to the other side of the wall and ran. The cafe was small and warm, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop, in a neighborhood Romeo's world had probably never touched. Noelle plugged her phone into an outlet near the counter, her hands unsteady as she waited for it to power on. She ordered coffee she didn't drink, her leg bouncing beneath the table, her eyes darting to the door every time it opened. The phone buzzed to life. She opened her banking app, and the number stared back at her. $1 million. Her throat tightened. Her fingers hovered over the screen, hesitant. This was why I agreed to marry him. This money could change everything, pay off my student loans, finish my degree, build a real life. But even as she thought it, her stomach turned. She couldn't do it. Not now, not after last night. Her finger moved to the transfer button. The app showed the original sender, R. Marchetti, and offered a simple option. Return funds. She tapped it. Return to Romeo. Marchetti. Amount $1 million. Confirm? She pressed. Yes, the money vanished. She stared at the zero balance, and something loosened in her chest. The weight she'd been carrying, the guilt, the shame. It lifted and dissolved. Her eyes burned, but she blinked the tears back. Noelle unplugged her phone and headed for the door. The black SUV was parked at the curb. Her stomach dropped. 3 men were already climbing out, dark suits, hard faces, efficient movements. They moved like predators, spreading out to block her escape routes. Mrs. Marchetti? The tallest one smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Adrian Falcone would be honored to have you as his guest. Noelle took a step back, her hand reaching for the cafe door behind her. No, I'm not going anywhere with you. She turned to run. Hands grabbed her arms, her waist, her shoulders. She screamed, but a palm clamped over her mouth, muffling the sound. She kicked and thrashed, her elbow connecting with someone's ribs, but there were too many of them, too strong, too fast. The cafe door opened, an elderly woman stepping out with a paper cup, and froze at the sight. Her coffee slipped from her fingers, splattering across the sidewalk. By the time anyone thought to call for help, Noelle was already in the back of the SUV, the doors locked, the engine roaring to life. The city streamed past the tinted windows, and Noelle flattened her palms against the glass, watching the world shrink into the distance. Romeo. His name echoed in her mind like a prayer, like a curse. What have I done? 2 men flanked her in the back seat. Mountains of muscle in dark suits, faces carved from stone. The one on her left had a scar running from his eyebrow to his jaw, the kind that told stories she didn't want to hear, the kind that promised violence. Noelle shrank against the door, her shoulder blades digging into cold leather, her fingers curling into the seat. Where are you taking me? The scarred one turned his head slowly. His smile was worse than his scar. A visit. His voice scraped like gravel against bone. Adrian and Vince Falcone are waiting for you. Her stomach clenched at the names. Adrian, the man from the gala. Green eyes that matched hers. The one Romeo had pulled her away from like she was something precious or something dangerous. She wrapped her arms around herself and stared out the window, watching the city give way to suburbs, then to empty roads lined with bare trees. 30 minutes of silence, 30 minutes of her mind tearing itself apart. I shouldn't have run. Her nails bit into her own arms, leaving crescent marks through her sleeves. Romeo will come looking for me. He'll find out I'm gone. And when he does... Her eyes fell shut, her forehead dropping against the cold glass. He'll come for me, because that's who he is. And these people, the Falcones, they'll be waiting. Her throat tightened. A sob built in her chest, but she swallowed it down, her jaw clenching against the pressure. I fell in love with him. That's why I ran. And now I've put everyone in danger. Romeo wouldn't let this go. He'd tear the city apart looking for her. And when he found out who took her, it'll be war. Because of me. The SUV turned onto a long gravel drive, and Noelle's breath caught in her throat. The mansion loomed against the darkening sky. Black stone, sharp angles, no warmth. Armed men patrolled the grounds with rifles slung across their chests. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress, built for war. Rough hands dragged her through heavy oak doors and down corridors thick with the smell of whiskey and cigar smoke, guns mounted on walls like trophies, no flowers, no photographs, no life. The Marchetti mansion felt cold. This place feels dead. They shoved her through a door, and there he was, Adrian Falcone, crystal glass in hand, rising from behind a massive desk with that too-perfect smile. Noelle Marchetti. His voice dripped with mock delight. What a pleasure to have you here. She planted her feet and lifted her chin. "You kidnapped me. Romeo will make you pay for this." Adrian set down his glass and circled the desk, each step predatory. 1 week of marriage, and you're already so devoted to your husband. He stopped in front of her, close enough that his cologne made her stomach turn. Before him, you were nobody. What makes you so special? I'm not special. I'm just someone who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Oh, I don't think so. He stepped behind her, his breath on her neck. I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be. His hands gripped her shoulders. Before she could react, he yanked her coat down her arms, the zipper scraping against her skin. She spun to face him. "Don't touch me." He grabbed her wrist. His fingers dug into her skin as he twisted her arm, exposing the inside of her wrist to the firelight. The birthmark, heart-shaped, dark against pale skin. Adrian went completely still. Then he laughed, sharp and delighted, bouncing off the walls like something unhinged. His grip tightened until she winced. "Call my uncle." He didn't take his eyes off the mark. "Tell him his niece is here." Noelle's blood turned to ice. "Niece? What are you talking about?" Adrian cupped her chin, forcing her face up toward his. Those green eyes, her green eyes, bored into hers with triumph. He leaned close, lips brushing her ear, and whispered, "Hello, cousin. Silk over steel. I'm not your cousin. I don't know what you're—" His hand shot out and grabbed a fistful of her hair. Pain sparked across her scalp as he yanked, pulling several strands free. She gasped, stumbling backward into the wall. "What are you doing? You're insane!" Adrian dropped the strands into a container one of his men held out. "DNA doesn't lie. By tomorrow, we'll have the results." He stepped closer, blocking any escape. His fingers traced along her jaw, and she flinched. And then, his voice dropped to a murmur. "Either you'll be the most powerful woman you've never imagined becoming." His thumb pressed against her bottom lip, revulsion crawling up her spine. "Or you'll be dead." He studied her face like she was a puzzle he'd finally solved. "Which would you prefer, Noelle? Or should I call you Bella?" The study door swung open before Adrian could say another word. Armed men flanked the entrance, but it was the figure walking through that made her blood run cold. He was massive, mid-50s, receding hairline streaked with grey, carrying his weight like armor. His suit strained across shoulders built for violence. But it was his eyes that stopped her breathing. Green, the exact shade of her own. Vince Falcone moved through the room like he owned the air in it, Adrian stepping aside with a small bow of his head. The older man stopped directly in front of her. His hand shot out before she could flinch away. Thick fingers closed around her wrist, yanking it up toward the light. He twisted her arm until the birthmark faced him. Silence stretched through the study. Vince stared at the heart-shaped mark, his thumb pressing into the delicate skin hard enough to leave a bruise. Something flickered behind his eyes, recognition maybe, or satisfaction. And when he finally released her, the sudden absence of pressure made her stumble backward. He turned to Adrian without sparing her another glance. "DNA test?" "Results come tomorrow morning, Uncle." Adrian clasped his hands behind his back. "I ordered a rush the moment we confirmed the birthmark." Vince nodded, then strode toward the exit. "Lock her up until the results arrive. No visitors, no communication." The door closed behind him with a soft click. Adrian shrugged, that infuriating smile creeping back. "Precautions, sweetheart." He snapped his fingers, and 2 guards materialized at her sides. "Rest." Noelle grabbed his sleeve, her voice raw. "What does that mean? Why does everyone keep staring at this mark?" She thrust her wrist toward him, her arm trembling. "Tell me what's going on." Adrian looked down at her fingers, his lips curving with amusement. "You really don't know anything, do you?" He peeled her fingers off his sleeve one by one. "Rest now, Noelle. All your questions will be answered soon enough." He nodded to the guards, and hands closed around her arms and dragged her from the study. The room they threw her into was a tomb. No windows, a single bare bulb casting harsh shadows across stone walls, a bed that smelled of mildew and neglect. The guards slammed the door. The lock engaged with a heavy thunk that echoed through her bones. Noelle sank onto the thin mattress and pulled her knees to her chest. 1 week ago, my biggest problems were rent and ramen. Now I'm caught between two mafia families, in love with a man who might walk into a trap because of me. A broken laugh escaped her lips. How does a life change this much in 7 days? She closed her eyes and willed herself to disappear. Sleep came eventually, dragging her under like a riptide. And in her dreams, she found him. Romeo's hands were on her body, his weight pressing her into silk sheets, his breath hot against her ear as he moved above her, inside her, around her. Look at me. His voice was rough velvet, demanding and desperate all at once. His fingers gripped her chin, tilting her face toward his. Look at me while I take you. She opened her eyes to find amber burning into green as his hips rolled and she gasped, her nails raking down his back. You're mine. His forehead pressed against hers as his rhythm quickened, her body arching off the bed to meet him. Say it. Tell me you're mine. Yours, she breathed. I'm yours. I'm yours. Romeo. Noelle jolted awake with his name dying on her lips. She blinked at the stone ceiling, disoriented, her body still humming with phantom sensations. She pressed her hand over her heart, feeling it pound against her palm. Romeo. His name ached in her chest. A tear slid down her temple, disappearing into her hair. Then another. She didn't know how many hours had passed. They'd taken her bag, her phone, everything. She was hungry, her stomach cramping with emptiness, and exhausted in a way that sleep hadn't touched. The scrape of metal cut through the silence. Noelle scrambled upright, wiping her face as the door swung open and Adrian stepped inside. He looked freshly showered, his dark hair slicked back. He stopped a few feet from the bed, hands in his pockets. You look terrible. She said nothing, just stared at him with all the hatred she could muster. Do you know what I've been wondering, Noelle? He stopped at the foot of the bed. Why your rich husband didn't buy you new clothes? These old things. He gestured at her jeans, her worn sweater. They don't exactly scream Marchetti wife, do they? Her jaw tightened. And there were no guards with you when we found you. No driver, no security detail. His smile sharpened, almost like you were running away. He moved closer, his shadow falling across her face. Were you leaving your husband, Noelle? She tried to pull away, but his face lowered toward hers. You're a true Falcone, aren't you? Running toward danger instead of away from it. Heat flooded her face. She jerked back and scrambled off the bed to put distance between them. If I'm a Falcone, her voice shook with fury, and you're my cousin, how can you touch me like that? Adrian laughed, the sound cold and mocking. Oh, sweet Noelle. We Falcones marry our cousins, always have. It keeps the bloodline pure, the fortune intact. He spread his arms wide. Your mother and father were cousins too. Did you know that? First cousins. Madly in love, apparently. Noelle's stomach lurched as bile rose in her throat. My parents were cousins. This sick family, this is where I come from? Adrian stepped closer and she stepped back, her shoulders hitting the cold stone wall. But now you're not Noelle anymore, his voice dropped. You're Bella, Bella Falcone, and I'm going to marry you. Fire exploded through her veins. She drew herself up, her hands curling into fists. I have a husband, you idiot. Adrian shrugged, unbothered. When he dies, you'll be a widow. He examined his fingernails. These things have a way of resolving themselves. Ice flooded her veins. When he dies. They're going to kill Romeo and force me to marry Adrian. Adrian grabbed her before she could collapse. Come on. He dragged her toward the door. Time to meet the family. The security footage played on loop, the grainy image burning itself into Romeo's retinas. Noelle climbing over the garden wall. Noelle dropping to the other side. Noelle disappearing into the darkness like she'd never existed at all. 24 hours. She'd been gone for 24 hours, and every second had carved a new wound into his chest. Behind him, Chiara's sobs echoed through the study, raw, broken sounds that Valentina couldn't quiet. The child hadn't stopped crying since she'd found Noelle's room empty. The door burst open. Marco strode in, his face tight. "Boss, we found her trail. The Falcones took her. She's at their compound." For a moment the world went silent. Then fury erupted through him, and his fist slammed into the wall, cracking the plaster. "How?" His voice was deadly quiet. "How did they find out about her?" Romeo stood in the silence, his chest heaving. The birthmark. They must have seen it somewhere. 20 years of searching, and they'd finally found their lost princess. And he'd handed her right to them. "I told you." Valentina's voice cut through the silence. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "I told you to kill her the moment you suspected. Now you've given them exactly what they needed. They'll be stronger than ever with Dante's daughter as their figurehead." Romeo turned slowly, and something in his expression made even his sister take a step back. "She saved your daughter." Each word dropped like a stone. "Chiara was almost taken, and Noelle threw herself over her body. She would have died for your child. And you stand there telling me I should have killed her?" Valentina's jaw tightened. "This is war, Romeo. Sentiment has no place in—" "Sentiment?" A harsh laugh tore from his throat. "Oh, God." Her eyes widened. "You started to like her. No, it's worse than that, isn't it? You love her." Romeo met his sister's gaze without flinching, and for the first time in his life, he let her see the truth. "Yes, I love her. She is my wife, in every way that matters, and I am getting her back." "And if she doesn't want to come back?" Valentina's voice softened. "She's Bella Falcone, Romeo, heir to everything. What if leading them satisfies her more than being your wife ever could?" "That won't happen." His jaw tightened. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know her." He strode past his sister. "Noelle isn't like that. She never wanted power. She wanted love, family. She wanted to belong." He yanked open the door and found Marco waiting. "Every man we have. Half stay here to protect the compound. The rest come with me." "Where are we going, boss?" Romeo's eyes were cold as death, but somewhere beneath the ice, a fire was burning. "To the Falcones. I'm bringing my wife home." Across the city, Adrian Falcone was telling Noelle a story. "Antonio Marchetti killed your mother first." His voice was almost gentle as he stood before her chair. "Then your brother Luca. He was only 8. Your father tried to fight back, but Antonio put a bullet in his head while your mother's body was still warm." Noelle sat frozen, her nails cutting crescents into her palms. "But he didn't kill you. The great Antonio Marchetti couldn't bring himself to murder a 3-year-old girl, so he left you on the steps of an orphanage." A smile curved his lips. "We searched for you for 20 years, and now, here you are." "Why does any of this matter?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm just a student. I'm not taking over anything." Adrian laughed, rich, patronizing. "Oh, Bella, you don't have to do anything." He gestured at a black silk dress draped over the bed. "I'll be your husband. I'll handle everything. All you have to do is exist, be the symbol that unites our family. Your father was Dante Falcone, the most powerful man this organization ever knew. With you by my side, no one will dare oppose us." He moved toward the door. "Put on the dress. Everyone is waiting to see their princess." The door closed. The lock clicked. Noelle stood motionless, then reached for the silk with trembling fingers. "Think. You have to think." She pulled the fabric over her head, feeling it slide against her skin like a serpent's embrace. If these men would follow her simply because of blood, if her father's name still carried that much weight, then maybe she could use that, find a way out. But even as she strategized, another thought coiled through her mind like poison. Romeo knew. He'd seen her birthmark. He'd married her knowing exactly who she was, the daughter of his family's greatest enemy. Was any of it real? His hands on her body, his voice in her ear, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. Was it all just a game, a way to control the Falcone heir? Noelle stared at her reflection in the mirror, a stranger in black silk with hollow eyes and a heart full of questions. Who can I trust? The face staring back offered no answers. The door swung open, and Noelle stepped into the light. Black silk clung to her body, the fabric catching the candlelight as she moved. Her chestnut hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and those green Falcone eyes seemed to glow against the darkness of the dress. Adrian's gaze traveled over her slowly, a satisfied smile curving his lips. There she is, my future wife. And my throne. Noelle's stomach turned, but she kept her expression neutral, her fingers smoothing down the silk at her hips. I need to use the bathroom. Adrian's eyebrow arched. Now? Everyone's waiting. She held his gaze, willing her voice steady. Unless you want me to faint in front of your entire family. He shrugged and gestured down the hallway. Second door on the left. Don't take long. Noelle locked the bathroom door and pressed her palms against the cold counter, forcing herself to breathe. Muffled voices drifted from somewhere above. Her eyes landed on a rusted ventilation grate. She climbed onto the toilet seat, twisted the loose screws until the grate came free, and pressed her ear to the opening. A woman's voice, low and urgent. This girl will unite the family, yes. But if you can't control her, you'll lose your power. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Then Vince's voice, that cold, flat tone. A laugh rumbled through the vent. Of course I have a plan. Once the Marchettis are finished, I'll eliminate her too. Neither she nor Adrian will ever lead this family. A pause. I killed my own brother for this throne. You think I'll hand it to anyone? Her blood turned to ice. He killed his own brother. My father. Not the Marchettis. Vince Falcone. Her hands trembled against the marble. The man who'd examined her like property. He was the one who'd murdered her parents, who'd orphaned her, who planned to kill her the moment she stopped being useful. And Romeo's family saved me. Antonio Marchetti saved me. The monster wasn't a Marchetti. The monster was her own blood. When she emerged, Adrian was waiting. His hand closed around her elbow, guiding her toward the distant murmur of voices. Noelle leaned close, her lips brushing his ear. Don't trust your uncle, Adrian. He stiffened, his grip tightening on her arm. What? She pulled back slightly, meeting his eyes. Vince doesn't share power, and I'm your insurance. When he eliminates me, your throne disappears with me. She held his gaze. Ask yourself, what happened to everyone who stood between him and that throne? Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Suspicion, calculation, the first crack in his certainty. Before he could respond, they reached the great hall. 50 men stood in formation, their faces hard as granite. At the far end, Vince Falcone sat on his carved throne, those cold green eyes tracking her every step. She walked through the center of the crowd, chin high, spine straight. Adrian fell into step behind her. Vince rose, holding a paper aloft. Behold, Dante's only daughter, the heir to the Falcone legacy, Bella Falcone, DNA confirmed. She has returned to us. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Vince's voice carried across the hall. With Bella's presence, we will reunite our scattered family. Her blood will strike fear into our enemies and... A man stepped forward, his arms crossed. This young woman will lead us? Vince's jaw tightened. Her existence represents Dante's bloodline. That alone will restore our power. At that moment, headlights flooded through the tall windows, black SUVs in the courtyard. Doors flew open, armed men pouring out, weapons drawn. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Vince rose from his throne, his jaw tight, and gave a single nod to his guards. Let them in. The doors swung open, and Romeo Marchetti strode through, flanked by Marco and a wall of soldiers. His amber eyes found hers across the chaos, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. Vince's lips curved into a cold smile. Romeo Marchetti, you dare enter my home? Romeo stopped in the center of the hall, his gaze never leaving Noelle's face. I'll burn this place to the ground if I have to. His voice was ice. But I'm leaving with my wife. Adrenaline surged through Noelle's veins. This was it, her only chance. She stepped forward, her voice ringing through the hall. Falcones, listen to me. Every head turned toward her. Even Romeo froze mid-step. She drew herself up, her hands trembling at her sides, but her voice didn't waver. "I am Bella Falcone, Dante Falcone's lost daughter, and I'm not here to claim a throne. I'm here to save this family from destroying itself." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "You want to destroy the Marchettis, and some of you want to destroy me too, because some people in this family don't want to share power. They want to hold it alone." Her gaze swept across the room. "But here's the truth. If Romeo Marchetti dies, the Marchetti Empire doesn't end. It spirals out of control. War escalates. Money stops flowing. Everyone loses." Romeo's expression flickered. Surprise. Confusion. Something else she couldn't name. "If I die?" Her voice caught, but she pushed through. "The Falcone family shatters. You'll tear each other apart, fighting for scraps of power." She drew a breath, steadying herself. "But what my uncle hasn't told you," her eyes swept the room, "is that I am already Romeo Marchetti's wife." Gasps, shouts. The crowd surged with confusion. Noelle raised her voice over the chaos. "We are already bound, legally, completely. The enemy you wanted to destroy? I married him." She let that sink in, then continued. "I am Falcone blood. Romeo is Marchetti power. As long as we both live, the Falcones stay united, the Marchettis stay in check, and the war doesn't end. But it becomes controlled." She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of man after man. "I married into the family you've been told is your enemy for 20 years. I'm sacrificing my past, my future, myself, to build a new order." Her voice rose, strong and clear. "I don't want the throne. I'm locking the throne." She pointed at the assembled men. "Kill me and chaos follows. Let me and my husband live and order follows. Wealth follows." She let that sink in. "Today you're not choosing a young woman to lead you. Today you're choosing a new order, one without death, one where unity brings riches." The men began nodding slowly. Vince's hands gripped the armrests of his throne, knuckles white. "You little bitch," he muttered under his breath. Romeo's eyes narrowed as he watched Noelle, admiration burning in his gaze. But something else flickered beneath it. Fear, perhaps. This woman who'd emerged from nowhere, commanding a room full of killers. He hadn't known she existed inside the girl he'd married. Noelle's hands trembled at her sides, hidden in the folds of her dress. Would this work? Would they listen? She began walking toward Romeo. Adrian's hand shot out, grabbing her arm. She leaned close to his ear. "Let me go. I'm your insurance, remember? If I die, you're finished too." Adrian's grip loosened. She pulled free and walked through the crowd toward Romeo. Their eyes met. Romeo's gaze was a question mark. "What are you doing?" Noelle mouthed silently, "Take me home." She stopped at his side, turning to face the Falcones. Her voice sharpened. "And there's one more truth you deserve to know." Silence fell. "The real killer is here, in this room. The reason I spent my life in foster care, in orphanages alone, the person who murdered my father, my mother, my brother," her eyes locked on the throne, "is Vince Falcone." Chaos erupted. Vince shot to his feet, his face twisted with rage. "Kill them! Kill them all!" Romeo surged forward, putting himself between Noelle and the crowd, his body a shield. Noelle's voice rose above the din. "He killed his own brother for power. He destroyed his own family." She pointed at Vince. "And the person who saved me, who pulled me from that fire 20 years ago, it was Romeo's father, Antonio Marchetti." Marchettis and Falcones drew weapons, pointing at each other. The room became a standoff. One of the older Falcone men spoke up, his voice rough. "We've always suspected this. That's why the family fell apart. We never trusted you, Vince." "Where's your proof?" Vince snarled, his hand moving toward his holster. "You'll believe this little girl over me? She's telling the truth." Adrian's voice cut through the chaos. Every head turned toward him. I've known for years. We all have. Adrian stepped forward, his jaw tight. My father was there that night. I remember it. I was 8 years old when he came home, shaking. His voice hardened. He told me, "Never trust your uncle. He'll do anything for power." Silence stretched through the hall. 3 months later, my father was dead. Adrian's eyes locked on Vince. "You did it. I know you did. To clear your path to the throne." Some of the older men nodded slowly, their faces grim. Adrian turned to face the crowd. "That's why you could never unite us, Vince. That's why the family scattered." His voice rose. "We never trusted you. None of us." The gunshot cracked through the hall. Vince's bullet flew toward Noelle, but Romeo was faster, throwing himself in front of her. The round tore through his shoulder, spinning him sideways. Before Vince could fire again, Romeo's bodyguard returned fire. Vince crumpled, blood blooming across his chest. Men drew weapons. Chaos threatened to consume everything. "Stop!" Noelle's scream cut through the hall like a whip. "Everyone stop!" She stepped around Romeo's injured form, her dress splattered with his blood, her hands raised. "No more death. Not today." A man aimed his gun at her. Another knocked his arm aside. "No one harms Dante Falcone's daughter," the second man growled. "Lower your weapons, all of you." A third man spoke up. "The Falcone girl speaks the truth. Why more death when we could grow rich through unity?" Slowly, reluctantly, guns descended. Noelle stood in the center of the carnage, her chest heaving, barely able to breathe. "This era is over, Falcones." Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. "A new era begins. Are you with me?" The men fell silent. They exchanged glances, a wordless decision passing between them. "Do you accept ending the war between our families? Do you accept unity and power?" Silence stretched through the hall. Then Adrian stepped forward, his voice steady. "Yes, I accept." Noelle turned to Romeo, who was gripping his bleeding shoulder, his face pale, but his eyes burning into hers. "Romeo," her voice cracked, "please." For an endless moment, he simply stared at her, this woman in black silk and blood who'd somehow turned the entire world upside down. Then he nodded once. "I accept." Relief crashed through her so hard she nearly collapsed. She turned back to the assembled men. "Adrian will take this throne. I will protect our alliance. I am both Falcone and Marchetti now." She reached for Romeo's uninjured hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "And now, I want my husband to take me home." Adrian gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. Noelle walked through the parting crowd, Romeo at her side, their guards forming a protective barrier around them. Her spine was straight, her chin high, but beneath the black silk she trembled like a leaf in a hurricane. The night air hit her face as they emerged from the mansion, and Noelle nearly crumbled. Romeo squeezed her hand. His shoulder was bleeding through his jacket, but his hold was unyielding. "Who are you, Noelle?" he murmured. She looked up at him, exhaustion and adrenaline warring in her veins. "I'm your wife." Something flickered in his amber eyes, heat, pride, something deeper than either. His hand tightened on her waist. They climbed into the SUV, and the moment the door closed, Noelle's composure shattered. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she stared at the blood seeping through his shirt. "You took a bullet for me," her voice broke. "You could have died." Romeo reached up with his good hand, wiping a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Did you ever love me?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them, raw and desperate. "Or was it all part of the game? Did you marry me just because of who I was?" He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I married you because I couldn't let you go. I kept you because I couldn't imagine my life without you in it." His thumb traced her cheekbone, gentle despite the blood on his hands. "I loved you, Noelle. And now, I can't live without you." A sob escaped her throat. She pressed her forehead against his uninjured shoulder, breathing him in, blood and cologne, and something that was just him. The Marchetti mansion glowed in the darkness as the SUV pulled through the gates. Before the car fully stopped, the front door flew open. Chiara burst through, her small body a blur of motion as she raced across the gravel. "Noelle!" Noelle barely had time to step out before the girl slammed into her, thin arms wrapping around her waist with desperate strength. "You came back!" Chiara's voice was muffled against her stomach, her shoulders shaking. "I thought you left forever. I thought—" "I'm here." Noelle stroked the girl's hair, her own tears falling freely now. "I'm not going anywhere." Romeo emerged from the other side, his hand pressed against his bleeding shoulder. But even wounded, he moved to his wife's side, his good arm sliding around her waist, pulling her close. Noelle looked up at the mansion, the Gothic architecture, the glowing windows, the guards at every door. A week ago, this place had felt like a prison. Cold, foreign, terrifying. Now, standing here with Chiara pressed against her and Romeo's warmth at her side, something shifted in her chest. She had been born a Falcone. Her fate had always been tied to this world, to blood feuds and empire wars and dangerous men. No matter how far she'd run, no matter how many foster homes and lonely apartments she'd drifted through, destiny had been waiting. It had brought her here, to the place she was always meant to be. Romeo turned her to face him, his amber eyes burning in the darkness. His bloodied hand came up to cup her jaw, tilting her face toward his. "Bella Marchetti." His voice was rough, barely a whisper. Her heart stuttered at the name. He leaned down, his forehead pressing against hers. "I love you, Bella Marchetti." Then his lips claimed hers, fierce and tender, desperate and gentle, a promise and a declaration all at once. Chiara watched them with shining eyes, her hands clasped under her chin, a smile spread across her face. "My Christmas wish came true," she whispered to herself. Then she looked up at the night sky, her voice dropping to a secret prayer. "Dear God, you heard me. So now I'm asking for something else." She squeezed her eyes shut. "A baby. Bring a baby to this house, so I'm never bored again." Noelle laughed softly, pulling back from Romeo's kiss just enough to look down at the girl. She didn't know how to be Bella Falcone. She didn't know how to be a mafia princess, a bridge between empires, a woman who commanded rooms full of killers. But standing here in the arms of the man she loved, with a little girl who'd become her family, she knew one thing for certain. This was home. And for the first time in her life, Noelle Adams, Bella Falcone, Bella Marchetti, finally belonged. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow. Now I have to ask you, if you were Noelle, would you have run away from Romeo or stayed and fought for your love? Team run or team stay? And please rate this story from 1 to 10 stars. See you in the next story.